Before I gavel in, we're going to have prayer led by Senator John Payton and ask him to remember our friend and colleague, Senator Stubblefield's family. Senator Payton, you are recognized.
Bow with me, please. Our Father in heaven, God, we love you and we thank you for this day. You're an awesome God, and you've definitely prepared the way before us for many generations. And Lord, we just pray that you'd help us in this gathering, Lord, to look for your guidance and your wisdom. Lord, we think of our brother Gary Stubblefield and his family. Lord, it seems like a very inconvenient time for his leaving, but God, your timing is perfect. May we understand that what we do here today doesn't just impact those that are here today, but those that will be coming in the future, as we'll all have an appointment like Gary to be called home. Lord, just pray that you give us your wisdom and guidance so that we make wise decisions. Lord, I pray that you give us an attitude of harmony so that we can subdue our passions and address the things before us, Lord. And pray once again for Gary's family, which by extension includes so many here. Lord, forgive us where we failed you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Call to order the Joint Performance Review Committee. Appreciate everyone being here today. Each and everyone welcome. I would ask that we hold talking comments down where everyone be able to hear. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the October 21st, 24 meeting. I'll take a motion. Motion. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next, we have consideration of the motion to authorize the chairs to approve special expenses incurred by the JPR committee. To take a motion. Have a motion. Have a second. Second. All in favor, aye. Opposed? That motion is approved. Our reason for our meeting today, we have a discussion on citizens' complaint regarding Franklin County prison proposal. I would just ask the presenters to come up. We are going to swear in all of our presenters today. That's something not all committees can do. We do have that, so if you'll come stand at the committee and I'll read you your oath. Just go ahead and get in front of your chair there and hit your microphone, please. If you will, state your your name and your position or employer.
Adam Watson, I'm a director with Gravel and Grit.
Natalie Cadena, Executive Director of Gravel and Grit.
Okay, if you will raise your right hand, and do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Acknowledge both of you. Please have your seat. Again, thank you for being here today, and at this time we're going to turn it over to you for your presentation.
Good afternoon, chairs and committee. My name's Adam Watson, as I said. My colleague here is Natalie Cadena. Before we get started, I want to take just a minute to thank the chairs, the vice chairs, for agreeing to set this hearing and reviewing our complaint, and to thank all the committee members present for taking the time to be here and hear us out. Ever since the governor announced the Franklin County site almost a year ago, we've consistently heard from lawmakers and state officials that citizens would have ample opportunity to be heard on this matter, and unfortunately it just hasn't proven to be the case. So we're extremely grateful for both your time and attention here today. It's also especially timely that we're here today in the wake of Senator Stubblefield's passing, and we're honored to be able to continue the conversation about an issue that was so vitally important to him. So our thoughts are certainly with his family and his district as they grieve his loss and celebrate his life. Turning to our complaint, in addition to the complaint itself, we've provided the committee with an exhibit list, a timeline, 141 exhibits, and a presentation that will be on all of your screens. And we'll talk through that presentation as we present our evidence. Since this is all pretty dense and voluminous, I want to go through just a couple housekeeping items so we're all on the same page before we dive into the complaint itself.
If you will, you're doing good, but slide that mic just a little bit
Certainly.
closer to you.
Is that better? First, we've been cautioned on more than one occasion, which I think is exceedingly fair, to be exceptionally careful about the veracity of what we present to lawmakers anytime we have the chance to speak with you. So the way we decided to present our complaint is in the style of a summary judgment motion. Now, kind of surprisingly to me at least, I only count 3 attorneys on this committee. So for those who aren't familiar, what I mean by that is we don't intend to make any factual statements to you today that aren't supported by evidence. So whether it's documentary evidence, prior testimony, photographs, news reports, etc., everything we share with you will be verifiable. Some of it's going to be quick as we try and keep up with the presentation, but assuming all this technology cooperates with us, the evidence supporting each statement we make will be displayed on the screens as we talk. If you're viewing each of those pieces of evidence will be labeled with an exhibit number on the screen, and that exhibit number corresponds to the list we provided you. If you're viewing that electronically, each line item contains a link to the reference source material, so it's easy to review. And what's looping on the screen now is an example of how to access that. But we're more than happy to stick around if there are any technical issues. And a quick note on technical issues, a couple of our videos are freezing up, but the audio is fine, so it's not you if something looks frozen. Second, we want to address what we expect of the committee, given its legislative purpose and limitations. We fully understand that this committee is not a police force style investigative unit that has either the leeway or the resources to launch a full-scale, quote-unquote, investigation into the matters we've complained about. We filed this complaint because over the course of our research and investigation into the matters we're complaining about, we've been able to piece together facts that tell a story that indicates what we believe to be the extreme likelihood of impropriety and malfeasance in a number of instances. But the tools available to us as private citizens are limited by the FOIA, lack of subpoena power, and the general ease with which state officials can avoid us. So while we can tell you a good deal of the story here, there are holes that we just can't fill in on our own. And that's where we're asking the committee to come in. We strongly believe that what we know plainly constitutes smoke, and we're asking the committee to determine whether or not there are associated fires. Lastly, we hope to keep our presentation to around an hour, including the time I've already taken. But complaint 4 will be about as long as complaints 1 through 3 combined, and it's very dense. So if the committee would like to take a break at any time, that would be about the halfway mark for us, and we'll remind the chairs when we get to that point. We see today as the first step of uncovering the truth in this matter. So depending on what you think about what you hear from us and the answers you get from the state officials in attendance, we'd strongly encourage you not to consider this a closed matter after today's hearing. Whether you decide that further hearings are necessary, that referrals to other investigative bodies or interim studies are appropriate, that legislative audit needs to get involved, or if you simply have additional questions or curiosities, we want you to know that the line of communication both to us and to our officials in Franklin County is always open. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie to get started on complaint 1, and then we'll go back and forth between the two of us as we progress through.
Good morning, and thank you for being here to listen to our.
If you will,
complaint
pull
today.
your mic down
Yep,
and
I
pull it
gotcha.
a little closer to you.
How's that?
That's good, thank
Okay.
you.
Good morning, and thank you for having us today. So our first complaint is that it reads that it is improper for Arkansas taxpayers to be burdened with supporting the salary of 2 leaders of the Department of Corrections. On January 10th, 2024, the Board of Corrections voted 5-2 to fire Corrections Secretary Joe Porfiry via special teleconferencing meeting. Governor Sanders immediately rehired him as her senior advisor, then appointed Lindsey Wallace as the replacement Secretary of Corrections a few weeks later. Taxpayers fund both salaries, so roughly $190,000 for both a year. And the media has well covered that there is no apparent role that Mr. Porfiry serves within the governor's office. However, documentation from the governor's office lists his role as the public affairs director. Now, by all appearances, it seems Mr. Profiri's role hasn't changed one bit since his dismissal and immediate rehiring. Internal emails reflect that months later, agency heads still defer to Mr. Profiri's leadership for matters involving corrections. Mr. Profiri still testifies on behalf of the Department of Corrections, standing in for Secretary Wallace when she's unable to answer questions regarding the new prison.
So why could they answer the questions on Monday, but they couldn't on Thursday?
Representative Wooten, I wish I had a good answer for you with regards to what your questions may have been to Secretary Wallace and her ability to answer those questions. I don't.
Stephen Vanier, the consultant allegedly running this project, addresses deliverables to the attention of Joe Profiri. In the prior committee hearing days earlier, when Secretary Wallace was still trusted to represent the DOC, she repeatedly responded with some form of "I don't know" to committee members. Questions at a theme in her testimony that we, and apparently some legislators, have noticed all too frequently for a department head.
I don't have the answers. I can't tell you the specific checks. I don't know the answer to that. And I just can't answer the question about how much the overall cost is going to be at this point in time.
What
We
we
also-
have here is a conundrum.
Oh,
We
sorry.
don't know,
Forgot about that part.
you don't know, and apparently the governor doesn't know.
So, where are we on Exhibit Q? I'm losing my place here. Okay, there we go. Thank you. We also think it's noteworthy that Secretary Wallace isn't even on this hearing's agenda to represent the DOC. Now, as to Mr. Profiri's qualifications for either a department head or some kind of senior advisory role to the governor brought Mr. Profiri to Arkansas out of a tumultuous run as the deputy director of Arizona's Department of Corrections. He was passed up for the directorship after playing or failing to play a role in events such as known but ignored prison lock malfunction, leading to attacks on guards and inmates, a severely lackluster attempt at managing the COVID situation in Arizona's prison system, and a botched software rollout so full of bugs that it led to hundreds of inmates being locked up beyond their release date, which is eerily similar to the system problems at issue in Grant Hardin's misclassification and recent escape from Calico Rock's North Central Unit. Mr. Profiri's personal friendships have also caused us to examine potential violations of Arkansas procurement law. On May 16th of 2024, Vanier's Executive Director of Justice emailed Director Laidlaw, Mr. Profiri, and several others about how excited Vanier was to work with the state and marking the beginning of a mutually beneficial relationship. The only problem here is that this is over a month prior to the state issuing the RFQ, which Vanier ultimately won. Vanier was introduced to state officials by Matt Cate, the former head of California's corrections agency and current consultant of whom Vanier is a client. He reached out for an informal discussion despite the political hurdles that needed to be overcome before formal planning could get started. I guess it's who you know, not what you know, and apparently he's an old pal of Mr. Profiri. This is one of those instances where we clearly see smoke, but since Mr. Profiri has been elevated to the governor's staff, FOIA is no longer an effective tool for us, so we can't investigate without further assistance. Now, since he appears to still helm the ship, we thought it prudent to review his prison construction experience. When asked about his experience bringing in prison projects under budget, Mr. Profiri responded as follows.
And a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Profiri, you said you built 3 prisons under budget or within the budget that was given to you.
That's correct, sir.
What year was that?
So the last prison that we built was in 2008.
Now, we're fine admitting that we aren't prison construction or construction budget management experts, but it doesn't appear that a criminal investigations manager supervisor special investigator, or correctional officer has anything to do with those responsibilities either, as evidenced by Mr. Porfiri's resume. So while his resume may reflect experience in monitoring prison systems, it does not reflect even a modicum of experience designing, planning, or constructing prisons. Notably, neither does the flowery biography included with his appointment announcement. What we think is clear here is that we have an acting Secretary of Corrections who is plainly incapable of fulfilling the role, and a fired Secretary of Corrections who's still doing the job, but with a reputation so bad from his previous job that Carlos Garcia, a 20-plus-year corrections professional, said, "Joe was doing crazy things and allowing crazy things to go on. He's going to go to Arkansas and do the same thing. It was the same garbage you guys are going to experience." Further, in his de facto role and continued adversarial relationship with the Board of Corrections is exacerbating an already flawed secretive process that has led us here today. So who's really running the show? Is it the alleged senior advisor with a bad rap, the stand-in secretary, the embattled Board of Corrections, or the high-dollar California contractor who points the finger back at the Department of Corrections leadership while taxpayers foot their bills for booze and first-class travel? Arkansas taxpayers are funding this incompetence, inefficiency, and potential illegality at a total clip of $377,000 a year, with no clear leadership of a corrections department trying and failing to undertake the second most costly capital improvement project in the state's history. While we have a full appreciation for the governor's purview to appoint her own staff, this is clearly a trampling of the Board of Corrections' oversight authority and a misuse of taxpayer funds. In addition to the list I handed out to you, or you have, there are some questions that we think are raised by complaint 1. You need to read those or just let them go? Okay. Are you going to click your way through?
Yeah, just catch me if I miss. Based on complaint number 2 is it's an improper use of taxpayer funds to pay a consultant for a task while simultaneously having an unqualified state agency perform the same task. Based on Mr. Porfiri's ALC testimony from November of 2023 that you're about to hear, the site selection process for a carceral facility in the state began in earnest of late fall of 2023. You'll also hear him note that the vendor selected is responsible for both selecting the site and ensuring community buy-in.
That the vendor who proposes to build the facility will have to inform us of the location and community buy-in with regards to where the prison will be located. That process is underway. We're hoping to issue an RFP sometime in the beginning of the new year.
Over the next several months, rather than a vendor, officials from TSS, which is another acronym now, apologies for not updating that, in conjunction with DOC officials and governor's office staff, worked to narrow down sites across the state that fit parameters, however fuzzy, developed by DOC. On July 3rd, 2024, an intern with GIS found an online listing for the property located at 6310 Arkansas 215 in Charleston. That site was put under contract at the end of July of 2024. Simultaneously with the site selection process that was being undertaken by state agencies, on June 25th, 2024, DOC issued an RFQ for owner's representative services for this project. That RFQ specifically referenced the need for the owner's representative to, quote, assist in the project site selection. These services are also contemplated in the contract between Veneer and DOC. However, well in advance of the contract even being finalized, site selection had already been completed, however inadequately, by state agencies with no specialized construction, workforce, or prison experience. On July 22nd, 2024, 3 full months before Veneer's contract's execution, GIS Director Shelby Johnson emailed his colleagues stating, "Prison site selection done." And as you saw a moment ago, the property was under contract just 3 days later. It wasn't until October 14th, 2024 that ALC even reviewed the contract. And in response to citing questions at that meeting, Director Laidlaw made false assertions to the committee, both that the site had not yet been selected and that Veneer would be assisting in that site selection.
Good morning. I'm just curious, where is this proposed facility going to be built?
We have not selected a site yet, so we're still working on that. In fact, the owner's representative will help us with finalizing our options for the best site that's most suitable for the facility.
Can you tell us any place all over the state of Arkansas? Is it any particular area of the state?
We have looked at many sites. We're working with criteria for the facility, which involves workforce numbers, access to emergency services, infrastructure. There's quite a bit of criteria. Workforce is a heavily driving criteria for the site as well.
So I guess I'm still trying to see where it's limited to. So could that be all over the state? Could be anywhere in the state, or do you know some defined area?
We've looked at sites all over the state. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Representative.
The state closed on the Franklin County property 3 weeks after that testimony. To summarize, that's 22 days from finding the listing to site selection done and under contract, 3 months prior to contracting with the firm intended to handle site selection. There were multiple other sites considered for this project, but unlike those sites, the state did not put the Franklin County site under an option contract. In fact, they had instructed their broker to put a Fort Smith property under an option just 7 days prior to locating the Franklin County listing. For the Franklin County site, they didn't use a broker and simply entered into a regular purchase agreement. Thus, not only did the state agency failures by both GIS and DBA result in selection of an unfeasible property for the project, the improper contracting mechanism negates the state's reasoning for intentionally hiding the site selection from the public. In other words, there was no danger of a bidding war breaking out for a property under a purchase contract.
In regards to the who knew what and when, ultimately it was important for the taxpayers with regards to ensuring that there wasn't an escalation in the price and a bidding war to keep it quiet. The price of this property was the property under consideration.
Yeah, the community wasn't buying it that night either. Considering the timing of the owner's representative contract and the state's subsequent closing on the Franklin County property, coupled with Director Johnson's email regarding the finality of site selection months prior, it's plainly impossible that Veneer could have legally participated in any meaningful manner in the site selection process. This means that taxpayers have paid in duplicate for both Veneer services, which it could never have legally performed, and the salaries of a litany of top-level state agency staff for the months of time working through the site selection process. More importantly, by failing to let experts conduct this critical piece of research geared toward finding a property that is actually feasible for this type of facility, the state finds itself here today, 5 failed votes short of funding, and all but begging for a design contract that has already slashed criteria to cut unnecessarily bloated costs rather than a design based on the state's needs, and at serious odds with the very community which it will desperately need to patrol these cells. These substantial oversights have undoubtedly cost taxpayers far more than just duplicate payments, and the state is left having purchased a property that is plainly not suitable for the facility it intends to build. Here are a couple of the questions that we think are relevant to this section while Natalie gets ready for section 3.
So in complaint 3, we ask, is expending taxpayer funds on a capital project without funding for such a project is irresponsible and improper? As we sit here today, the state has either spent, committed to spend, or is on the cusp of asking the legislature to approve the spending of tens of millions of dollars on a project for which the legislature has repeatedly refused to even create an appropriation. Now, to dispel some misinformation that was going around after session, the legislature did not approve $75 million specifically for this project, a project which had not yet even been thought up when the legislature appropriated that $75 million in connection with a 498-bed expansion of Calico Rock's North Central Unit. Notably, that appropriation was specifically for prison expansion, not new prison construction. Semantics, I guess. We note this for two reasons. One is to dispel any information indicating that there was even tacit approval for the current project by the current legislature. And second, to note that those figures place the cost of that expansion at about $150,000 a bed, while the math on 3,000 beds at $825 million is almost double at $275,000 a bed. And that's only if you believe the one-page estimate Veneer came up with over a 3-day weekend in March. Nonetheless, appropriately or otherwise, the $75 million that is currently being drawn from this project represents less than 10% of that estimate. We think DBA's minimum standards are clear. Departments are responsible for ensuring they have sufficient appropriation and funding for the capital improvement project prior to the solicitation of bids. We also think Arkansas law is clear. For projects of this state or any agency of this state, amount appropriated means funds currently available for the project prior to the opening of any bids. Common sense should also prevail here. How is plowing ahead with a project that lacks any guarantee of funding and spending $75 million on paperwork anything more than an attempt to box the legislature into a corner? We believe the intent here is clear because we've heard the argument before. Back in December of last year, Senator Gilmore told us in reference to the mere $3 million the state had already spent on the property that officials needed to be good stewards of taxpayer money, and there is a very slim likelihood that we would look at any other land. Ostensibly indicating that once money is spent on a project, that the project must move forward. Continuing with that logic is not difficult, but it becomes all the more pressing and pressure-inducing when it's $75 million at stake instead of just $3 million, which the residents of Franklin County had offered to buy back the land. Pressure cooker aside, spending $75 million on an unfunded project puts us precariously close to repeating a mistake that South Dakota just made. After dumping more than $54 million into the project, South Dakota scrapped plans for their new 1,500-bed, $825 million prison, strangely, half the number of beds we expect at the same amount to get us. South Dakota pivoted to a more inclusive and transparent process that prioritized community acceptance, logistical feasibility, and fiscal responsibility in selecting a more appropriate site for their project. While, of course, we would like to see Arkansas do the same, the taxpayers would certainly like to see the state have the forethought to do so before we're $75 million in the hole. Overspending is overspending, but we think it's especially egregious when there has been so much disinformation spread about the true budget for this project. In a span of just 4 days this past spring, the project cost ballooned to almost double what the executive branch had been selling the public and the legislature for almost 2 years. Not only did the $470 million prove to be false, but DBA had explicitly told the governor's office in writing as early as December of 23 that budget would not deliver 3,000 beds. Perhaps even more troubling, Senator Hester noted that the cost for a 3,000 bed would be $750 million in 2022, before Governor Sanders even took office.
What numbers are we talking about when we say we need those 1,000 beds so we can alleviate the responsibility from our local sheriff's departments?
Well, I think the Department of Corrections is saying maybe 1,000 beds. I think that the information that I'm getting is saying we might need up to 3,000 or 3,500 beds, but a 3,000 bed prison would cost us about $750 million.
Coupled with the fact that WDD's initial program study returned an estimated cost of $1.2 billion in late summer of 2023, we don't believe there's any possibility that the $470 million was ever a reasonable budget for this project, especially not as the selected site. Conveniently, when instructed to go back to the drawing board, WDD was somehow able to shave $730 million off the estimate to match the governor's announcement. So it's no surprise that we're again shaving down the design to match the alleged budget instead of constructing the most appropriate type of facility for the state's needs. This is all exceedingly troublesome, given that the governor's initial letter to the JBC requested only a $330 million appropriation, which, like the current $75 million, would leave the project woefully short of full funding. Meaning the legislature and the public were sold a budget the state should have well known was insufficient until the legislature balked. Then the estimate raised by 76% in 4 days. The pattern seems clear. Under budget to secure funding in order to force the legislature's hand when it comes to approval of the remaining funds that will actually be needed to finish this project. With Senator Hester's $750 million estimate, the $1.2 billion estimate from WDD, DBA's insistence that $470 million wouldn't cut it, and the widespread speculation that this is really a $1.5 billion project, this behavior causes grave concerns that we would remain in this cycle of underfunding leading to manufactured legislative pressure, even had the legislature approved the governor's appropriation request in session. Again, overspending is overspending, regardless of the amount, and it's bad enough for the state in its own right. But what really deserves examination here is the process. If we have an executive engaging in a concerted effort to strong-arm the legislature into funding capital projects, the veracity of and motive behind every statement from the executive in connection with such a project should be called into question and carefully examined. And to our complaint, that starts with the funds already expended prior to legislative approval. Here are some questions relevant to this section, and before I pass it to Adam for the last section of our presentation, this is a reminder that if you want to take a break, this would be the halfway point.
All right, section 4, and it's dense. We tried to do our best with keeping visuals on the screen for y'all to follow along, but apologies in advance. So failing to conduct proper due diligence on real property prior to its purchase is irresponsible and improper. So I want to start by acknowledging that, yes, we've seen the 47-page site assessment prepared by GIS and offered as Exhibit D2 to this hearing. We've also presented it as Complainant's Exhibit A, and that's how we're referring to it in our presentation, just for clarity. We contend that the information we're presenting to you in this section clearly indicates that pulling data on a parcel of real property does not constitute the extent of pre-purchase due diligence required as stewards of taxpayer dollars to determine whether such parcel is feasible for any particular project, especially not for the second most costly capital improvement project in state history. If it did, we wouldn't be sitting here today with some of the most basic, fundamental questions about this project unanswered. Worse yet, not only was proper due diligence not conducted, but the state's internally created and ever-shifting criteria were ultimately watered down to the point that they might as well have been abandoned altogether in the final site selection. So let's start by looking a little bit at that criteria. First and foremost, the state's criteria for the prison was a moving target throughout the search process. So we're going to walk through those and chart them before we get into the specifics of the Franklin County site and how it matches up. The earliest version of the criteria we can find, and therefore the most inconsistent with the state's ultimate site selection, is back to Mr. Porfiri's testimony in front of ALC on November 17th, 2023.
With respect to the prison construction and those 3,000 beds, Arkansas history of prison construction has been through the use of donated land. Often donated land within the state of Arkansas to build prisons is not at a premium. It costs a lot to improve that land to make it suitable for an infrastructure to go on top of it. Additionally, it's not in the most right location to allow for a workforce that can immediately staff that prison, as well as a sustainable workforce that can maintain the facility over the long haul as far as having appropriate staffing levels. So I'm deviating from that past behavior as the status quo I do not believe has served the state of Arkansas well with regards to the locations of prisons in the state of Arkansas. I have specific criteria associated with where that prison should be constructed, and it has to do with, like I said, a sustainable workforce. It's got to be within a certain proximity to a level 3 trauma center. I have to ensure quality of work life for those employees that work at that facility, which means that the commute has to be reasonable from their homes and that it has to be close to highways, and the land has to be suitable for construction of such a facility. In addition, community has to embrace the fact that a prison would go into their community or near their community. So all those factors will be associated and written into the procurement action that the vendor who proposes to build the facility will have to inform us of the location and community buy-in with regards to where the prison will be located. That process is underway. We're hoping to issue an RFP sometime in the beginning of the new year.
So we'll go ahead and chart those out. And next, we have criteria outlined in December of 2023 by Director Laidlaw with additions from Mr. Cooper with DOC. Those will be on the chart, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on the email. We'll put them on there. The next set comes from a DBA presentation in January of 2024, which largely mirrors Mr. Cooper's list from December, with the addition of a county population requirement and a workforce formula provided by a consulting workforce expert. Put those on the chart. Next, which this is the last version documented prior to the site purchase. In March of 2024, we see another DBA presentation that changes the approach a bit. Rather than laying out specific criteria, it notes that, quote, sites are evaluated according to how they meet criteria overall, rather than any single factor alone. We'll put that on the chart. And lastly, we see the primary search criteria accompanying the DOC site assessment that Director Johnson emailed to the BOC just the evening before their vote to accept the Franklin County property. These criteria notably omit any specific information, instead opting for language such as, quote, availability of primary infrastructure and, quote, proximity to emergency services. But we'll go ahead and chart out what we can. So let's briefly ignore which criteria the Franklin County property does and doesn't meet and just look at the moving goalposts. The Franklin County property was first identified via an online listing by GIS on July 3rd, 2024. For the 20 months prior, real, tangible, and quantifiable criteria existed for the location of the proposed prison. As you can see by this comparison, not only did the final post-purchase, quote, criteria become so amorphous that just about any large tract of land would have sufficed, but critical elements such as distance to an interstate, cost of infrastructure improvements, and most importantly, community acceptance were completely omitted. Now, Secretary Wallace maintains that the state did everything it was able to prior to purchasing the property.
What I do understand to be factual is that everything that we could do before we purchased the land was done in terms of checking things out.
However, nothing in the purchase agreement for the property prohibits any study the state would have wished to conduct during the due diligence period. They even went so far as to extend the standard 90-day due diligence period through the day before closing. Secretary Wallace's position is proven false by the state's own actions in beginning to conduct the very studies it should have and could have conducted before purchase 6 months after the fact. And our point is essentially proven by this admission that reports being delivered on June 25th, 2025, almost 8 months after the close of the due diligence period, constitute, quote, necessary due diligence. The bottom line here is this. Watering down your site criteria to fit the parcel of land that you want to purchase is the opposite of due diligence. It's setting the DOC up for failure. And that's before we even address the shortcomings of the Franklin County property when compared to the final site criteria, which we'll start going through now. So out of these 6 different versions of property criteria over a year-plus period, let's try to walk through these with the focus on the versions of the criteria that are both quantifiable and make the most realistic sense as they relate to the needs of an adequate site for a mega prison. We'll check off the first 2 in the state's favor. We don't need to waste time here. It's not within 60 miles of an existing DOC facility, and it's not in a floodplain. So the next is urban versus rural. While the site is not within city limits, which meets Director Laidlaw's early draft criteria, we would tend to agree with the DBA presentation from March 1st, 2024, that many rural locations, including this one, are completely ruled out, both based on lack of infrastructure, which we'll cover in more detail down the list. As further support for that opinion, we would refer to the Texas Sunset Advisory Commission's report, recent recommendations that TDCJ develop a plan to close its rural facilities that can't be staffed. So for us, this category gets an X. Workforce, and this one is dense, there's some math, so apologies again. We think each of the criteria laid out in this category is pretty important, but we're going to start with an easy one. A county with 30,000 plus population. Franklin County has 17,097 people, so that crosses that off the list. Next, and probably more important, is a location that's immediately and sustainably staffable, taking into account the quality of work-life balance to employees. So let's take a look at the workforce formula that Director Johnson received in response to his reaching out to a workforce expert with questions about how to evaluate potential sites. That formula is explained on screen, but we have to modify a couple things to fit this site. First, the expert here is relying on manufacturing as the recruiting base for her 20% participation rate. So we need to adjust that to fit this project. The Bureau of Labor Statistics lists correctional officers and jailers as accounting for 0.2% of the workforce, and all protective service occupations as 2.2%. If we're exceedingly generous, disregard the lower participation security positions, and anticipate that our current environment doubles actual labor participation in the entire industry, we can just round up and use a 5% participation rate. Then, to compare apples to apples, we need to remove the expert's 50% reduction in population to calculate labor force, because the state's comparison numbers are already to total labor force as opposed to total population. So what that means is the total labor force needed is the number of positions to be filled times the number of candidates you need per position divided by the participation rate in the industry. The appropriate formula for evaluating the site per the state's expert can be noted mathematically as you see on the screen. So when we plug in the variables that we know to staff this prison and look at the expert's criteria, her optimum scenario allows for 50 candidates per position looking to be filled. When you run the math, that gives us a required labor force of 800,000. Her minimally acceptable scenario is 25 candidates per position. That returns a needed labor force of 400,000. The entire labor force in the entire 5-county area surrounding the Franklin County site is 108,784. Based on the state's own site assessment, the labor force is short over 291,000 workers for the expert's minimally acceptable criteria. And that would be far worse if we were looking at just the 30-mile drive shed. Where the math gets even more telling is scoring the reality of the site's regional labor force against the expert's scoring scale. For this, we have to do a little bit of algebra and change the equation to solve for candidates per position. We do that by multiplying our participation rate by the labor force available, then dividing by the number of positions needing to be filled. And mathematically, that looks like this. Again, when we plug in our known quantities, 6.79 candidates per position is our result. And if you check the expert scoring scale above, it only awards candidates scores down to 25 candidates per position. The site scores a 0 out of 10. Look, it took us a while to work out all that math, and apparently it was hard for Director Johnson too, which totally makes sense to us. Again, we dispute that GIS should have ever been doing this kind of evaluation in the first place, but it's clear that even when getting an expert's position on the site score, an expert's opinion that the site score is bottomed out for workforce, the state promptly ignored the data. All of that math doesn't even address the inherent conflict in the state's assessment data. On the left, we see a depiction of the 30-mile drive shed surrounding the site, reflecting a labor force of, which is 18-plus population, of 127,395, while the entire regional workforce map on the right shows a labor force of only 108,784. Because the entire drive shed falls within the region but doesn't encompass the entire region, it's plainly impossible for the drive shed to have a larger labor force than the region as a whole. Notably, though, even with the inflated figure listed on the drive shed map, the expert's formula still returns the same results. The site ranks a 0 out of 10. That's right there. And look, we've already heard the talk about reducing the number of beds at this facility from 3,000 to 1,000 to save face. So for clarity, the math still results in a 0 out of 10. These are the kinds of massive shortcomings that neither a pay bump or a new bridge are going to solve. However you want to slice it, the workforce category gets an X for this location. So services has a lot of different categories on it, so we're going to walk through a couple of them, and we're not going to talk about landfills, but proximity to a trauma center, distance from a hospital, those things are important for a prison. So hospitals. As the site assessment shows, the site is indeed 19 miles to the nearest hospital, which is just within the 25-mile criteria. It also correctly reflects that the closest level 3 trauma center is Mercy Fort Smith, which clocks in at 27 miles, or a 38-minute drive. We can't definitively say whether that fits into Mr. Porfiri's criteria of, quote, within a certain proximity, but it sure seems prudent to us to be closer than the better part of an hour drive from a trauma center when you're running a prison. Here, the site assessment clearly has the data, so we don't know and can't say whether the state considered it just good enough or didn't consider it at all. Fire departments. This is an area where a GIS assessment just doesn't present the full story of the reality of the site. What's left off of the fire department's name on this map, other than by acronym, is that each and every one of these are volunteer staffed, and all but one is specifically designated as a rural fire department. What that means is that they're mostly intended for hay baler and brush fires, and they look like this. This is the nearest one to the site. And look, we're not disparaging our firefighters. We love them. But neither of the two gentlemen that work at this facility are going to put a dent in a prison fire. All of that routing analysis also omits that all of these fire stations would be solely reliant on transported water, given that the nearest fire hydrant is 6.8 miles away, and that is a lot of hose to unroll. Law enforcement. So this is one of those that I don't have documentation to back it up, so you're welcome to take my word for it or ignore me. But one of the points specifically consistently brought up by our community is that Charleston is a quiet, peaceful town. Even its motto is where serenity prevails. And we don't have police patrols in the city past midnight. More importantly and quantifiably, for both county and local law enforcement services, the state admitted in the town hall that the prison will cannibalize local law enforcement for at least several years before it levels out.
When the North Central unit was built out of the law, real similar to what we have here in Charleston in the rural community, and it did not affect the local law enforcement that significantly, say, after a couple of years. When the first government, yes, but after several years it did not. It doesn't affect it today.
The site is also on the wrong side of the river from the sheriff's office. Bottom line, between distances, law enforcement cannibalization by the prison, and an already existing critical workforce issues that we just discussed, your response times are going to be less than ideal, to say the least. All in all, it doesn't appear that any single one of these categories sufficiently meets the desired criteria, and certainly when taken as a whole, the property fails the test of the services criteria category, and we're giving it an X. Interstate access. So what you're seeing on the screen is a video of the drive from the nearest interstate exit, which is I-40 in Ozark, to the proposed site. This video is at 10 times speed. You won't see a shoulder, a passing lane, or a pit stop past Ozark for that whole video. While you watch that, let's take a look at the criteria. Pretty uniformly, easy access to I-40 is noted, and that's further quantified as within 2 miles of the interstate. This site is 23.3 miles from that exit at its nearest point. That means for any potential employee using I-40 to commute to a job here, that's a 34-minute drive after they exit the interstate. It doesn't exactly factor in well to that work-life balance that Mr. Porfiry discussed back in 2023. Let's see how far we are. So we're not even halfway there yet. And remember, this is 10 times speed. So anecdotes aside, the site is over 10 times the distance desired from the interstate and clearly fails this category. We'll add an X when we get there, I guess. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but it's beautiful country. This is what I couldn't show you in the beginning. In the middle of the video, it's the map showing 34 minutes and 23.3 miles from the interstate. We're going to give that an X, I think, pretty clearly. Infrastructure is the next category on our criteria list. And the first of that is wastewater. So on-site wastewater treatment facilities are nothing new to prisons in this state. However, no evaluation has been made for the cost escalation for the construction of a treatment facility versus a site with public sewer available. Likewise, no pre-purchase considerations were made for the potential environmental impact for neighboring properties Onion Creek flows through and their potential exposure to the prison's discharge, which the site assessment at least puts a number on at 127 properties. Moreover, despite warnings that Clean Water Act issues were identified on the property, the state failed to conduct a 404 Wetland Act designation evaluation until 6 months after it purchased the property. And we've seen no evidence of even a plan to conduct an environmental impact study. So despite, quote, wastewater treatment feasible being one of the few items included in the final search criteria, the official site assessment omits any relevant information about such feasibility. Electricity. 8 to 10,000 amps is a massive amount of power, which makes sense. 3,800 people on the side of a mountain is effectively a bigger city than exists in any direction for miles around. Similarly, the state site assessment fails to meaningfully address this category, possibly because the final search criteria doesn't list 8 to 10,000 amps with 2 sources, it simply lists electricity available. What the site assessment does show is that there are not 2 sources available. There's 1 transmission line owned by OG&E and services provided by Arkansas Valley Electric. It also notes that residential service is specified, meaning that this isn't dual or 3-phase power running through beefed up and backed up substations. This is rural residential basic power. What it does reflect is the depiction of a high voltage line bisecting the property. Thankfully, somebody at the state has realized that they can't build under those lines and has inquired with OG&E about simply moving them. I guess that's an easy thing to do, I'm not sure. But this wasn't until 3 months after the purchase, and it comes at an unknown cost, even though these easements were readily available and constitute title encumbrances that are a basic facet of any pre-closing title commitment review process. Roads. Curiously, we don't see road criteria referenced outside of kind of cursory references to needing paved highways, but we're including it here, 1, because it's included on the site assessment, and 2, because it's something that's critical to consider for any massive scale construction project, which ultimately will have hundreds of entries and exits every single day. In the site assessment, we see a few of the highways in the area, along with average daily traffic counts as of 2019. So 5-year-old data seems a bit outdated to us, but since this really isn't telling us anything other than existing traffic counts, I'm not sure that really matters much. What's much more important than current traffic counts are future anticipated ones, coupled with both the quality and integrity of the highways and potential need for improvement. Though on March 20th, 2025, we heard Mr. Porfiry testify in front of the Joint Budget Committee that, quote, "The roadways there are no different than the roadways anywhere in the state."
Roadways, my understanding of roadways are the roadways there are no different than the roadways anywhere in the state. They're built to a specific standard, and there's no issue associated with whatever load that is going to be necessary to construct this facility with those roadways. Those roadways are no different than any roadway to any facility that we currently have in the state of Arkansas.
Rather coincidentally, at the very same time Mr. Porfiry was testifying, RDOT was drafting an email regarding the major upgrades needed to the roadways prior to construction and its associated traffic. And they note a minimum cost of $500,000 a mile for those improvements. Clearly, all roads in Arkansas are not the same. And clearly, judging from the conflicting information given 5 months after purchasing the property, the state did not fully evaluate the roads, or the anticipated impact on the roads, or the cost implications of needing improvements to them. Subtopically to roads, bridges are one of the most glaring examples of why simply pulling map data does not constitute proper due diligence. On the site assessment, you see a total of 2 weight-restricted posted bridges mapped and no other bridges in the area. And that's 100% accurate, straight from RDOT's records. However, what you don't see is that RDOT defines a bridge and therefore only maintains records on, quote, bridges that are over 20 feet in length. Now, because RDOT doesn't maintain the data, we found it for ourselves. Again, we'd love for you to take our words for it, but if you want to come out and count, we'll follow along with you. Based on our counts, there are 259 either short bridges or culverts less than 20 feet along the highways depicted in this map. And they have no RDOT records or inspections associated for public access. If I were a betting man, I'd wager that our county judge has some thoughts on the quantity and size of loads that are going to be traversing these crossings. So to the elephant in the room, water. Look, I think everybody here has read the news and the reports on water, so we're not going to belabor the point, but we do want to make sure we're briefly all on the same page. The state site assessment merely includes a water line map, and for reasons that are unclear to us, some pictures of area water towers, which would be insufficient to service the prison for even a single day. Again, relying on map data and a barely cursory email from ADH showing 3 million gallons of excess capacity in Ozark's water system, the state checked the minuscule criteria of, quote, water available off of its list. I don't think I need to explain in great detail that you can have 1 billion gallons of excess capacity. If you don't have access to the ability to treat or a mechanism to deliver 1 billion gallons, you might as well have nothing. So here we sit. Fort Smith is a no-go. We all know the $50,000 test wells didn't pan out, which state water experts find even the prospect of doubtful. The well experts say deeper isn't better, and there hasn't even been chatter of a hydrogeologic study to protect the scant water that the neighbors actually can access. And no one's even bothered to call Ozark, who, by the way, has publicly stated that they can't do it and don't support it. Folks, our neighbors have been screaming at the tops of their lungs that there's no water on that mountain since they first heard the governor's announcement over KDYN's airwaves last Halloween. Even if, by some miracle, the water situation were to sort itself out tomorrow, the current set of circumstances bears out the heart of this complaint. The state did not do its homework. This is even more telling as the amount of water needed is a known quantity, and there's no lack of $57 million design contract to hide behind, or at least there shouldn't be. And if the murmurs we're hearing are true, it boggles our minds that the remedy sought by our conservative state government for its own lack of due diligence could be turning to federal welfare for a bailout. The site fails this criteria categorically, and objectively cannot be the best place in the state to attempt to build this facility. So it gets an X. Okay, those were a couple dense ones. So the next are more straightforward, and apologies for getting into the weeds, but I think it was necessary on a couple of those points. So size and topography is next. For size, over somewhere between 76 and 300 acres. Check, that's easy. Topography, relatively flat, which, I don't know, seems important when you're building something that folks like to try to escape. If anyone knows anything about contour lines and maps, that's not flat, relatively or otherwise. So I guess since these are kind of combined criteria, we'll do a check and an X and give it a half point. Locale, super easy here, don't even have a slide for you. Franklin County is not any of those preferred locations, so that's an X. Soil reports. So this item is listed on as critical, a critical criteria, and has information pulled from USDA data on the site assessment. However, just a little bit of experience with industrial real estate informs our assumption that the intent and useful preliminary report here is a geotechnical report. Again, a true feasibility study would have revealed this and conducted the appropriate test immediately, as evidenced by the fact that the state did eventually conduct this testing 6 months after it purchased the property. While the official preliminary geotechnical itself is itself preliminary, and its introduction notes that a final geotechnical investigation and report should be conducted, Veneer's cover letter does note that, quote, some mitigation measures are expected and will have cost implications. So here again, the documents prove our point. Stopping the site search and purchasing a property without full investigation escalates cost. And without evaluating this site against more appropriate ones, the state will never know how much more it has to spend simply by virtue of its poor site selection. So for us, this gets an X, but we understand it's kind of amorphous and we made an assumption, so we're going to be just lenient and give it a check. Community acceptance. So if you've been following the list, which I know is tough with how much we're covering, you've already noticed we skipped one. Really, we just went out of order because who wants to end with soil studies, I guess? Look, in no uncertain terms, Mr. Porfiry testifies to AOC that community acceptance is a must for this type of facility.
In addition, community has to embrace the fact that a prison would go into their community or near their community. So all those factors will be associated and written into the procurement action that the vendor who proposes to build the facility will have to inform us of the location and community buy-in with regards to where the prison will be located.
Then it's never spoken of again. Just a few weeks ago, our Senate President Pro Tem gave an interview where he stated that not only is the reality that a majority of the people in our community accepting and supportive of this prison, but that the ones who aren't want to see violent criminals walking our streets.
A majority of the people in that area are for this prison. There are a few that oppose it. Look, there's always a few people, they oppose prisons. They want violent criminals walking the street.
Ladies and gentlemen, my community has absolutely been put through the ringer with the level of dismissal, disrespect, and denigration shown to it by the state throughout this process, and I cannot emphasize enough how patently false that statement is. The best evidence I can give to you of this is the fact that city councils for every municipality surrounding the Franklin County site and the Franklin County Quorum Court have signed resolutions opposing this project. And this is what the streets in our small towns have looked like since last November. In small towns and rural communities in Arkansas, we still understand that the best way to gather information or opinions on something is just to get folks in the same room and have a conversation with them. Instead, the state chose to cut us out of the process and ignore this vital requirement to the project's success. In case you haven't had a look behind me, a few of our friends and neighbors have joined us for this hearing. So if you have any doubts whatsoever about the level of community acceptance for this project, each and every one of them would be more than happy to discuss it with you offline at any time. For us, this gets the biggest X out of all of these. So we're done with going through those. We can score it. That comes out to 4.5, generously, of the 12 categories that this site satisfies, and none of the critical categories. That doesn't paint a pretty picture, especially if we're concerned, as Mr. Porfiry was, about the sheer increase in cost and time required to force this poorly selected site. So poorly selected that even Director Laidlaw twice emailed colleagues noting that the site was not viable just days before Director Johnson's email that site selection was complete. So, if you find any assertion that the state conducted proper due diligence is true, then it must follow that they have consistently ignored the facts that any such due diligence uncovered. While we can't make assumptions about their motivations, we can review the facts of the matter, and the facts clearly demonstrate that despite the rampant insistence to the contrary, this site is by no means the best site in the state for a new prison. It's less than ill-equipped for a prison facility, and it presents a myriad of out-of-the-ordinary barriers to building a new, large-scale prison. The state is arguing that somehow it doesn't know what the design for the project is and that it cannot determine answers to feasibility-related questions until this legislature approves a $57 million design contract. But it does know that this is the best property in the state for that project. These are plainly mutually exclusive ideas. And Mr. Porfiry said as much back in 2023, when the plan was to go about this project the proper way and bring in a design professional before site selection to secure community acceptance. In contrast, this project has been done backward from the start. The state selected the site, then hired an owner's rep, and now seeks legislative approval to spend $57 million to retroactively rubber stamp its bad decisions. At the end of the day, the work the state did just doesn't meet the high bar of due diligence. The information it gathered doesn't indicate site suitability for the project, and nothing done to date constitutes a feasibility study. Spending nearly $3 million of taxpayer monies without checking these boxes is a misuse of taxpayer funds. Alleging that we need to spend $57 million more to check these boxes is reckless. And the consequence is more than wasted dollars. It's the loss of credibility, time, and trust at the very moment when these same state leaders claim they were doing all of this to solve a pressing crisis. So for the last time, there's a couple questions on your screen that we think are relevant to this section of the complaint. That's all I have for this section, but before I pass it back to Natalie for just a couple closing comments, just for me, I'd like to thank the chairs and the committee again for your time and attention, and the opportunity to be here and present all this to you today.
Push your microphone, please.
Thank you. Is that better? Okay. I hope what we've shown you here today solidifies the fact that we aren't here as obstructionists in the way of progress. We aren't bringing you purely NIMBY arguments because we're upset about having our way of life fundamentally altered. And we certainly aren't here because we somehow want to see dangerous criminals walking the streets. We're here because any process that leaves a government in this kind of direct and consistent conflict with its citizens, some of its most supportive citizens, no less, deserves to be examined and corrected for future iterations. From our perspective, this project has been the perfect storm of lack of transparency, executive overreach, incompetence, and dishonesty. We believe we've shown you ample evidence of all of 4 categories of behavior in today's presentation. While we were preparing for today's hearing, in a moment of sheer exasperation at the monumental task of condensing our research into a reasonable presentation, I commented to Adam that we could have another month to prepare and a full day to present, and we still couldn't cover everything in this story. Similarly, A journalist who came and spent a week with us in Franklin County to cover the story remarked at the end of her trip that should one choose to do so, an investigative journalist could make an entire career out of just this project. What we've shown you today is a fraction of what we've uncovered, and all of this is just from some Google searches and FOIA requests. Arkansas deserves the full story. They deserve honesty, transparency, and accountability from their government. And if nothing else is clear today, what has become blindingly obvious over the last year is that they aren't going to get any of that without your help. We both know this was a lot of information, so we want to again thank you for conducting this hearing and for your time and willingness to listen. We're happy to take any questions you might have either now or at any point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take questions today as time. Thank you. If y'all will, again, I understand the passion. I understand good presentation, but we'll refrain from those things. I will take questions from committee and non-committee members. We will also monitor time and try to be as fair with that as we can. So first up, Senator King, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to let you know that the water I provided there on the table for you to make sure I know what these long presentations can be in the water. I just want everybody to know that Brian King is on record as providing more drinking water there than they found at the Franklin County site for 3,800 people. So, you know, Senator Stubblefield and I had tons of conversations about this. We had a lot of conversations about cattle. You know, we talked about the water, you know, and people look at the NIMBY lie that has been out there that has continued to be told. You know, we looked at a cattle. If we were putting a 3,800 head feedlot out there, before we purchased the property, we would have done due diligence and made 1,000% sure that that was there, or at least, at the very least, purchase the property with contingency basis that you would find it. You know, you talked about 96. I mean, I've drove that several times. You know, what you didn't see in that video, folks, is there's grass growing up in that highway. I mean, there's literally the whole thing will have to be resurfaced. The other thing is, too, you know, with what Senator Hester's comments about you just want dangerous people. I've been in politics long enough. If you're right on the facts and the truth, the best thing your critics are going to do, go to it in politics shaming today, is lie about your position. Franklin County, all my counties passed jail taxes. They have made commitments to lock up better people. So I just am proud of you guys for, number one, doing more research than what Joe Porfiry did on trying to find the right site location and not dispel this thing of just being a NIMBY, and I don't want it in my area. So thank you very much for doing your presentation.
We're happy to hear you be here, and thank you for listening to it.
Representative Bryan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At some point in your presentation towards the beginning, you made some statements about the $75 million that was appropriated for the Calico Rock expansion back in 2022, and then you followed up with, I think the quote was, funds were expended prior to legislative approval, or otherwise kind of insinuated there was some misspending of that money. My understanding was that Act 151 of 2023, that money was reappropriated back to Department of Corrections for capital improvement projects. So are you saying that law did not reappropriate that money back, or I don't understand the...
No, I think what we're mainly saying is that spending $75 million on a project where the budget is $825 million is inappropriate. I just thought it was notable that that money was initially specifically appropriated for prison expansion, not new prison construction.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. But it'd be fair to say that the money was reappropriated after there was the fight on prison expansion. Is that not correct?
Sure.
Specifically, I think I recall that the governor's office wanted to go ahead and expand some of the beds at prisons we have, and the Department of Corrections pretty much shot that down and then got into a lawsuit. And at that point, it was then proposed to build a new prison. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that depends on your thoughts on what the best solution for the problem that we're having is, which, we're not really here to address today, but the way it's been handled for this specific project, we're alleging is inappropriate.
Follow up, Mr. Chair. But isn't that exactly what we're here today, is to solve this problem? I mean, at the end of your presentation, you made a statement, one of y'all made a statement, something to the effect of like this supposed crisis. I mean, are we not in a crisis when it comes to our prisons in this state? I served on a quorum court before I came to the legislature, and we couldn't put people in our county jail for misdemeanors because it was full of state inmates. We now have state inmates that are getting released under EPA. I mean, these are, I'm sorry, but they really are violent criminals. In fact, to get ready for today's hearing, I went and looked at the EPA reports for 2022 when they last had to do a round of releases, and I picked a name at random. I just literally picked a name at random out of the list, and it was a guy that had been arrested and sentenced to 20 years for raping a 15-year-old, and he was out in like 3.5 years under EPA. I think we do have a crisis, and we got to do something about it. I mean, is that not the purpose that we're here today? Whether it's building a new prison here, there, or somewhere else, we got to have space for these people.
I think the purpose of this committee is to address the complaint that we filed and the crisis, the decades of underfunding that's led to the crisis, all of the situations surrounding that aren't really at play today. What's at play today is the improper way the state has gone about this specific capital improvement.
Senator Dismang, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, to that end, because I've been a little bit curious myself, I mean, and it may be specifically directed towards you or the other chairman or whoever, about what are we looking at for an outcome today? I mean, is there some action that you think that we're going to be taking, or, but because they clearly believe there should be an action taken, that was what was just stated. What is the perception of the leadership of the committee?
I will give you my perception as the chair of JPR, and my co-chair and I both agreed to have the meeting. One was we don't have meetings for every citizen request. Not every citizen's request has this many people involved. Not every citizen request has had this much media. Not every citizen request it probably has had as much factual information, and it may cut both ways. I'm trying to do the responsibility of the chair. As for the outcome, my reason for having this committee is for transparency. That's been stated, and I hope that is also felt the same way from the state's point of view, because again, they have their own packet and they'll be able to speak too. But it's to give an air of transparency and an air that this thing can be covered in a fair way. As far as whether it'll change anything, I don't have a predetermined mindset. I'll let my co-chair speak if you'd like to.
Senator Dismain, I agree wholly with what Senator Rice said. I know we have to eventually sometimes let our citizens groups, when it's such a large item and such a big request, to come and present. What comes out of this meeting is up to the group that sits behind them over here. You know, if we want to carry this any further, that would go through here. Or if they want to carry it any further, they'll go to where they have to. But I think we're hearing it. Let you guys hear it, make your decisions if you want to do anything about it or not. That would be mine.
So, I mean, just to be clear, I'm great with the transparency and great with the discussion. I mean, is there expectation that there's going to be some kind of vote for some type of action, or you're both saying that that is to be determined? Because I'm just trying to understand what my role is as a committee member for what it is we're doing, aside from listening, which I am very happy to do.
I mean, if some of the committee wants to make a motion to vote on something's fine. What my goal is here today is take this and determine if there's more information needing. Again, it's been stated, and I think the other side finally came to maybe the term of investigation is not the same as it is for some terms of investigation. We have our limitations, but there are things within state government we can check on. If we feel like there's something needs to be done, we can do that. If not, we'll determine by taking in the information today and decide if we want to discuss any more. Hope that answers your question. I do not see anyone else on the board for these. If not, thank you for your presentation, and we'll move on with the agenda.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Joe Perfuri, Senior Advisor, Office of the Governor of Arkansas. Is Mr. Perfuri here? And I will clarify with staff, like I asked earlier, did you ever hear anything? Okay, I'm going to go next. We may come back to that. Next, I'll go to Ann Laidlaw, Director, Division of Building Authority, Department of Shared Administration Services. Ms. Laidlaw will come up. Also, we have Shelby Johnson, Director of Division of Geographic Information Systems and SAS. Welcome. If you'll turn your microphones on, and I'll give you the oath. If you'll stand, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear, go ahead and state your name first, please.
Ann Laidlaw.
Shelby Johnson.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all being here, and I will open it up. You've heard the citizens' complaint. I'll let you go wherever you need to, and then we'll open up for questions.
Happy to answer your question, sir.
Ms. Johnson, you same?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, members, questions for Ms. Laidlaw or Mr. Johnson? Got Senator Ricky Hill.
Over here. I guess I'd just like a response from you for the information that they provided where they used your name on it a while ago.
Well, there were,
From the emails all the way through, I want to hear your opinion on what you think about the information that they provided. Were they accurate? Were they not? Just kind of overall aspect. We're giving you a chance, or I'm asking you to rebuke or agree with what they said.
thank you for the opportunity. Yes, sir. Obviously, there were a lot of written communications, a lot of other conversations that we had. So I think what you've seen are excerpts from a lot of that. You're not seeing the full explanation or comments in many cases, and I think that's something we have to keep in mind, is that information's been pulled out that they wanted to share. Other information was available that was not shared. Certainly the statement about my visiting the site, I did jump out ahead on the 4th of July weekend and told my husband, let's go take a road trip. I want to go to Franklin County, and he goes, well, I don't understand. And I said, well, we're going to go. And I made that trip to Franklin County. I did come in through Highway 96, which, as the video shows, and many of that you all are familiar, is not the best highway. So my comments that I returned with on that following Monday were, I have concerns about the access to the property. So the rest of the team went out, and they looked at it, but they came in a different way, a different highway, which was far better, that does carry better traffic, and also went into the Fort Smith area, which is a main artery that will provide workforce for the site. So my assessment was a quick one I did on my own, not taking into consideration all the roadways and arteries that are available to the site. And so I made a statement, but they were able to come back and show me that there were many other ways to access the property, which I agreed. I did not do a thorough site visit the first time I went out. Our team worked very closely with Geographic Information and the wonderful resources and the knowledge that they have to go in and to access the data they have access to that my office does not. We also did extensive communications and conversations with other state officials, other state offices that are tremendous resources for our state to do further research on the site. So yes, we did do extensive work. My notebook is proof that there was a lot of work that was done, but I did not do that on my own. We had tremendous help from GIS and other state resources. So you saw written communications, but I think you only have seen a portion of communications that really don't tell the full story or information that it's important for what we've done here, the work we've done here.
Okay, before I go to Representative Eubanks, let me ask you this. Where do you live?
Where do I live currently?
Where do you live? Yes.
I live in North Little Rock.
Okay. Do you travel the state extensively?
I have traveled it quite a bit over the years. My family lives in Crittenden County, and I travel I-40 about 3 times a month. I travel to take care of my parents.
And I will agree with your statement that things can be taken to present one side, can be factual, and present one side stronger than maybe the whole thing.
Yes, sir.
Also, you're not from that area.
No, sir, I'm not from
You
that
don't
area.
travel that area regular.
I do not.
You don't know those people. You don't know the jobs. You can look at a piece of paper like I do, and I don't know the whole story.
I do not dispute
So
that. That's correct. Yes,
that's
sir.
from a common sense mindset. Mine's very common,
Yes, sir.
very simple. But we don't know each other's backgrounds, and we don't always know the whole story. And I think some of that on both sides
Yes, sir.
is what we're dealing with today.
I agree.
So with that, I appreciate that. I'm going to Representative Eubanks.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's been almost a year ago when we were first notified that the governor was going to make an announcement on a Thursday that we were building a prison in Franklin County. Senator Stubblefield and I were notified that Tuesday that press conference was going to take place. I believe both of you were in the meeting that I asked for that Thursday morning because Charleston was going to be having a town hall meeting that night, and we met in the conference room behind us, where I asked, and I think just about everybody that was involved in the site selection or the main folks were there, and I wanted to know what the criteria was for this site selection. You know, the first thing that I was told was that it would be within so many miles of an interstate. And I remember commenting, I said, well, you missed that one right off the bat. And then you went through a lot of the things that have been mentioned as far as workforce and infrastructure, as far as roads and everything. But I remember asking specifically, have you talked to Fort Smith or Ozark with regard to water availability? And my recollection was that I was told yes. Now, I saw something that was presented earlier that in that letter where Ozark had, I think the Department of Health had contacted Ozark and they had 3 million gallons excess. But I don't know if the right questions were asked of them. I mean, is that raw water? Is that filtered water? You know, the problem is you may have a lot of raw water, but if you don't have the filtering capacity, it's not going to do you any good. Given the news articles that have come out in the last few weeks regarding Fort Smith's issues that they have currently with their water system, and that Ozark is either unable or unwilling to sell water for this project, it really does make me question whether, you know, the proper process was gone through in order to determine whether you have the infrastructure needed in order to have a 3,000 bed prison there. And just given that fact, you know, it doesn't foster a great deal of confidence that the other calculations that were made with regard to workforce and everything are accurate as well. I attended the Charleston Town Hall. Of course, I wasn't asked any questions other than when I was notified. Later, there was a town hall in Cecil that I attended, and later that week, I was asked to come out and ride over the property on a side-by-side, which I did with some people that live very close proximity to the property, and that was before it was posted. So as far as I know, I didn't break any laws, but, you know, I saw the lay of the land, but I'm not an engineer, I'm not a builder, I'm not an architect. So you know, we can do a lot of things, you know, with building, but I also know that it looked like there was a lot of solid rock up there, and I know that's going to impact building costs and everything. I guess my frustration is I don't know that I have a lot of confidence in the process. This legislature has hired consultants in the past dealing with a whole host of issues, whether it was procurement or health care or insurance or whatever. It seems like we sort of did that, but we didn't allow them to do their job, and I don't even know if that's an accurate statement. But I don't think we should expect our state employees necessarily to have the expertise to make these decisions. So I'm not trying to put the blame on you, but I know you were probably trying to find a location that might fit, and it looks like we just tried to make this fit. And if half of the stuff that has been presented by the group from Charleston is accurate, I don't think we did. I don't know that I have a question for you other than that there seems to be an unwillingness to even consider another site at this point, and I don't understand that either. I mean, I've been in business for myself just about my whole adult life, and as you get more information and more facts, you've got to be flexible enough to make different decisions. And so are you still convinced that you think this is the best site for this prison?
Yes, sir, I am, especially after reading the consultant's report from McClellan Consulting Engineers. Their report goes through the cultural features, threatened and endangered species, wetlands inventory, the geotechnical studies, and that report affirms that our work was sound. And that may be debatable, but our site selection was sound based on the report that came back from them. And so I'm very proud of our work.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the things that was been brought out was the need for community buy-in, and it's apparent that that didn't take place. I mean, it was mentioned a couple of times. I think Mr. Porphyry had actually, based off of what I viewed on the screen, actually said that that was a key ingredient. Senator Stubblefield and I represent that area, and we didn't have a clue that they was even being considered until the Tuesday before the announcement.
Yes, sir. That would be a policy lane that would be not my lane, and I don't believe it would be Ann's lane either.
That's correct.
Senator Payton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So prior to the contract date where the state was obligated to purchase the property, what were your departments tasked with? Or prior to the commitment date, Director Laidlaw, what specifically had your department been tasked with doing in the way of due diligence?
Correct. Obviously, we had to get it under contract before we even have access to the property. So a lot of preliminary work was done through GIS and their mapping and resources and data that they had to see where it fell within the criteria that we were working with. But once we contacted the broker, we were able to access the site, do some additional work, but we had to actually put the site under contract before we got an appraisal or before we could order a survey.
So prior to contract, was your department asked for a thumbs up or a thumbs down on this property?
We were still assessing it, of course. We had to do our due diligence before we could do that.
Well, I'm saying before.
The initial criteria, yes, sir. We did do that, and we did see that it was meeting the criteria. So we needed to dive deeper. We put it under contract, which, yes, sir, there is an exit once we went under contract. That's what the due diligence period is for, of course.
When did that expire?
The contract was going to expire late October, and so we were given 90 days to do our due diligence. And so we did work as quickly as we could during that period of time. That's where we were accessing a number of state resources. GIS was on the property numerous times, doing evaluations and surveys and using their drones to get more information, as much information as we could. But that was our deep dive period.
So somewhere within that 90 days,
Yes, sir.
both your departments gave a thumbs up as this property being suitable.
By the time we got to end of that period, we were able to check off those items on the list that we were asked to accomplish, yes, sir, for the site assessment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just for clarification, might help somebody, on the two things, I can't remember, I believe it was mid-July, where you made a statement not viable. Was that within that 90-day period?
That was before that.
That was before the 90-day period?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I want to clarify that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Representative Wooten, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one question, if I may, of the chairman before we start. Will the governor's office respond to their personnel not being here?
We'll bring that up when we get through with these two.
All right. Thank you.
Is that all you had, or you have more?
That's it.
Thank you.
I want to make a statement before I start questioning. Having been in law enforcement several years ago, I am for a prison. We need one. But the location that we picked is the wrong one. I want you to answer this question. Did you look at the water? Did you drill?
I will let Mr. Johnson answer the question, because there was a lot of looking at the water, yes, sir.
He did look at it?
Yes, sir. We evaluated that with our partners over at the Arkansas Department of Health. It's the engineering section that they have a regulatory role on water. And
did you consider the drillers that drilled out there?
No, sir. That happened later.
Okay. So that's not been considered. That with the flow rate of the need of 500,000 gallons has not been addressed by anyone in state government. Is that correct?
Do you mean the load for tank?
I'm talking about the water availability.
Supply.
Supply.
Yes, sir. Let me see if I can pull up that information for you. So I'll just read you the salient parts. This is from Craig Corder. He is at the Arkansas Department of Health. He's one of the engineers that works on the water there. And his...
That's not my question.
My question was about water.
Did you look at the drilling report developed by the two drillers that drilled out there on that site?
No, sir. That happened after our work was completed.
Well, what do you mean it happened afterwards?
It happened after we completed our site selection recommendation.
So you approved the site not knowing what the flow rate was of 2.6 gallons per day?
No, sir. It wasn't my role to approve the site. We were making a recommendation for the site. Our colleagues over at the Department of Health...
Somebody needs to kick the chair back and tell the governor how it is. And it's going to have to be some of the staff that's going to do it.
Yeah.
For one, I'm furious about the fact that Mr. Porphy, whatever his name is, from Arizona, didn't get here, didn't be here. Committee members, that's a slap at every one of you that the governor's office is not here. And I am not for violent criminals going up and down the street. Now, one more question, and let me just go through the whole list. You didn't check the water flow from the drillers. The fire wasn't looked at. The electrical supply wasn't looked at. The soil was not tested. Did y'all test the soil?
No, sir, we didn't test the soil.
You did not test the soil. Do you know that they drilled down 190 feet and they hit rock all the way down except for the last 8 or 10 feet?
Yes,
And I
sir.
know the chairman said if they had to go 1,000 feet, they would, but how much is that going to cost us? But you didn't do any of that.
We did some preliminary work. We knew the makeup of the soil. We did consult with the soil expert.
Okay,
We
what
did
about the
know that we were
workforce?
dealing
Did you
with-
look at the availability of the workforce?
Yes, sir.
Representative Wooten, if you would allow me, I'd like to read you something from the Department of Health, and then I can show you an illustration. It's back on your question regarding water.
All right.
The capacity of the 4-inch line, which stops at the property, may not be adequate to supply your proposed facility. While a hydraulic analysis would be needed, an 8-inch main from the intersection of 217 and Highway 215 extending north along Highway 215 to the entrance to your site will potentially provide adequate water to your site. And then I have this exhibit here, if you'd like to see a copy of it, which is the water pipelines that the Department of Health has for that area. The red dot in this exhibit is the site, and just south of that site is an 8-inch water line that comes up to the tower that's on Ridge Road.
But that's not answering the question.
Uh,
That 8-inch line is there provided that the water is available. The water is not available up there. The city of Ozark, the city of Fort Smith, the city of Charleston, Paris, and the rest of them up there, they cannot supply the water of 360,000, I've heard, or 500,000. Is that a true statement?
I don't know.
You don't know. And yet you're the geologist for the state?
No, sir.
For
Geographic
the
Information
depart-
Systems.
Okay, let me ask you, Madam Director, how many trips did you make up there?
To Franklin County?
Yes,
I think I made a total of 3.
to the site.
3.
How many?
I made numerous trips around the state as we were searching for property. Yes, sir. I was involved directly on traveling looking for sites, but I made 3 trips to Franklin County.
I have no further questions at this point.
Thank you. Senator Hickey, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Of course, I'm one of the members that did not vote for the appropriation, but I also want to say that my dealings with both of you all have always been great with state government. But I'm going to ask you a pointed question, and then I want to go back to the water, if that's okay. So, and I think Senator Payton may have been hitting on my question, but I want to ask it a little more direct. Were either of you ever asked to make this site work by any legislator or executive branch, any employee or any other political figure? And again, that'd be all inclusive. I just want to know, did someone say, we want to make this work, and tell you all to do that some way?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
So back to this water line. So you all are the ones that I need to ask the questions about this?
We do not fulfill the regulatory role over drinking water in Arkansas. However, our colleagues at the Department of Health do.
Okay. Well, I don't know if they're here. I'm as with Representative Wooten about this availability. This whole utility deal has been my concern from the beginning. Matter of fact, you know, I even tried to run some legislation to try to get more money because I thought, well, we cannot do this without this availability. And it just wasn't hard to see that it was not there. Now, all of this also come out during the session that, you know, Fort Smith was not going to be able to supply the water, and Ozan didn't have the capacity or the filtering capabilities or this and that, and we were getting all that information. So we did the site selection, and you're telling me that there was an 8-inch water line, which is basically all we did. We just seen that there was an 8-inch water line that was within so many miles or whatever of the property.
That's the nearest large line that comes in from the south. There's a 4-inch line that's in front of the property. Okay. And so we knew that the River South water system had water pipelines in that area, and we knew all along that all of that infrastructure would likely require upgrades.
Okay. But with what we've heard now, We understand that it might require upgrades and it might be cost effective to do that. I've struggled with this from day one, that, you know, you don't find a piece of property that's located within the utilities of the water and the sewer, because, you know, it's on a percentage basis, and I'm not saying to pay above market value, but I'd rather go out and pay 500, 600, 700,000 more for a piece of property that's got those utilities that are not only available, but that are able to supply it. So I'm hearing this thing about this 8-inch water line, but obviously with what's come out, this isn't going to work without throwing, you know, I heard you say earlier about it has the potential to carry it. Well, the potential is going to cost how much more now? Because I've heard upwards to 200 million, 250 million to try to get that type of line with that capability to either come from Fort Smith or to do something different. What have you all found that it's going to cost now to get that potential 8-inch water line where it needs to be able to service this 3,000 bed prison? And I'm going to stick with the 3,000 because that's what we've been told from the get-go.
Yeah.
I mean, Senator Hickey, we knew that we were not going to find a site that had all the infrastructure there on the site. We knew we were going to have to do upgrades and extensions. So that was not, we didn't go out with the expectation of it all being there. I mean, this is the size of another community. So we just needed access to those utilities. We knew there would be cost associated with bringing that infrastructure onto the site to accommodate the prison. The cost associated with the water, we are not the ones that are working on that right now. We have another department or two that are actually looking into that to see what options may be available to be able to do that. But we didn't expect to drill to find enough water on the site, but we did know there was going to be access to water through the information we were able to get from the Department of Health. And the same for the electricity. Water treatment plants are something that are typically have to be done with correctional facilities. Data communications, a lot of other utilities were also looked at, of course, and we were able to be assured that access was there.
I understand. And if I can I continue, Mr. Chair? So I understand what you're saying. But with where you were then, you had to assign a cost, or somebody had to assign a cost, a contingency that says the upgrades available, we think that, you know, that we can get that done within $6 million or $7 million, whatever it may have been. I'm making something up. What is that upgrade going to cost to be able to deliver that water all the way to the location to be sufficient? And I want to know, are we talking about, is that all inclusive of fire hydrants along the way? Is that calculating other residents wanting to be able to tap onto it? Are we going to put those boots and saddles on while the ground's open, or are we going to have those residents to do it later? Where are we at? Because I keep hearing all this stuff, and I heard one of our members ask the questions, what are we doing here today? I'm not a member of this committee. I'll tell you what I'm doing here today. I'm trying to figure out a way to vote for the appropriation. And all I do is get further and further and further away. And it's not that I want to be hard. I don't think that, unlike a lot of people right now, that we've made a boondoggle. I don't think that it is a train wreck. I think that we've merely made a misstep, and somebody needs to say we've made a misstep. Unless you can provide me the information today that says that what that water is going to cost to get there, and then I can talk about the sewer treatment. How much more is it going to cost to get where you can turn on a spigot, a faucet at that location with filtered municipal water?
Yes, sir. I wish I could answer your question. I don't have that answer today. Those are studies that are still yet to come.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir.
Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the latitude for non-members to ask questions. So Senator Hickey asked a question, and I think it's important. It was a direct question, but for those that are watching this in the audience or they're tuning in, I want to make sure we're abundantly clear. Has anyone asked you to retrofit or to make this site selection work for a political or non-political reason, be the site that we ultimately recommended back to the executive branch of the government?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Absolutely not.
Under no duress,
Absolutely
extent of
not.
that, okay.
No duress.
Since this the announcement of the site location, has there been any members of the legislature, members of the government come to you and ask for the possibility of looking at a different site location? If so, has there been any work or preliminary work done to investigate those sites and to see if they're cost effective or possible?
Not subsequently, no, but we did quite a bit of work on alternative sites, other sites that we had in the portfolio before we landed on this site. There was a lot of work done there.
Can you just explain some of those additional sites? I mean, you don't have to go, parcel 125 in
We
Benton
had,
County, but
what, top tier, 5 different sites that we were working on that we had through, I mean, we went through like over 25,000 sites, down to 6,000 sites, down to those that we actually were able to physically go look at, and that's where we ended up with our top tier of sites, which we did eventually, and someone made the comment that this Franklin County wasn't included in the counties. Well, it was actually, the River Valley was, and so it stretched from Conway all the way to Sebastian County. So it clearly was within the area that we had identified as ideal for the prison, for the correctional facility. So we did identify a number of sites. We just weren't able to get any other sites under contract up to the point that we had done our due diligence, had moved into due diligence on the Franklin County site. But it was, were checking the boxes also, but you have to have a willing seller, and we just were not able to get to a willing seller situation.
And Representative McKenzie, if I may, one of the key points that is kind of in the fine print of our work, but it's very important to understand is it's not like just going up to your favorite buffet and ordering off the menu that you can find a site like this. The second thing that's important is that we also were looking at register or commercial properties that were listed for sale in our early work. We mapped about 50 properties that were around the state that were listed on the multi-list that were at least 250 acres or bigger in size. And those, what we were looking at, we were finding what I would traditionally call hunting property. And so I think that, and I want to say, let me just pause for a second and provide thanks for the critique by the citizens from Franklin County. They have for sure sharpened their pencils, and they critiqued our work, and I think that is a very democratic process for this committee to be able to allow them to provide that to you today. But where I was headed was that one of the things that they articulated in their presentation was the difference between urban and rural. And so when I think about urban rural, I think about not Highway 215, which is where this site is at. Sure, that site is a rural site. But to me, rural is dirt road. And where we were finding these commercial properties that were traditionally hunting style, what I would characterize as great place for deer hunting, those were the larger tracts that you would see come up for sale. They would be in upland areas, very steep, usually have hollers and creeks in them, and they were accessible only by dirt roads. So that dirt road accessibility automatically, you look at those 50 properties, and we were automatically taking, a big chunk of those right off the list because they were on a dirt road.
Okay. Just as a quick follow-up, Chair. So the conversations revolving around is suitability. I would love for a prison site to be like an RV camp where we plug in and ready to go. We know that's not the case. This is a significant piece of infrastructure. I'd love to your point about the folks the citizens' complainants, I think they did a great job of outlining certain elements. The suitability of this site compared to you said 25,000 down to 6,000, down to 10, down to whatever other number. Can we talk about the financial or fiscal checks that you did and how much more or less were those other sites in comparison to the Franklin County site? Not without its hangups, so I think we all can understand and appreciate that. And then just anecdotally or because you led this recommendation process, tell us about some of those hangups that made those sites unsuitable, not suitable, or the costs that were associated that would put them in a completely not buildable category.
Correct.
I want to take a stand first, if you don't
Okay,
mind,
go
Dan.
ahead.
When we looked at those top tier sites, we were finding things that were like every site had a pro and a con. And some of them we found, right on the interstate. We found other sites that had expansive flat space, but it was on the other side of a railroad track, which means you're looking at an $8 million overpass, construction to bring traffic to that site. So every site that we were looking at had pros and cons. One of our sites had a stream that ran through it. It probably precluded it from being able to be a great site because of that stream. Another site had a cemetery on it. And so as we were looking at all these sites, they all had some really glamorous things about them. There was one site that was north of Alma, had a 3 million gallon water tank sitting right on it. But the owners would never come to the table.
And we did have one of our top tier sites that we were really excited about, and it got sold right out from under us. And then the new owner had said, well, we'll talk to you. And the price on that property just exponentially was so much higher. And then there were some other conditions associated that it was just no longer viable for the state. So, and that was one of the things about this site. When we located it, it had, and I will mention that we had identified it in the big scale of when there were a lot of properties, but that property actually went under contract. This Franklin County property went under contract. So it wasn't on our radar at all. They had an experience with, I think, a solar company that tied it up for a while. And so when the property came back on the market, they were not interested in getting, drawn out in a long due diligence period. So our contract period was only 90 days. But when we circled back and were able to and had access to it, we did get kind of excited because it was checking a lot of those boxes that we'd been looking for, and we had a seller that was very willing to work with us, give us access, allow us to start doing a lot of that preliminary work that we needed to do. So, the price that we were able to get this property under appraised value, which thrilled us. In addition to that, it was a much lower price per acre than we'd expected to be able to get, and certainly less than the few other sites that we were actually able to get that were listed based on the listing price for those properties. So there was a number of very positives in that respect for the property.
One more, Mr. Chair, if that's possible.
Wrap it up.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to have to tighten up on my time.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. It's fair criticism for the citizen complainants on the criterion, and I will agree that I think I can attest for like Senator Hickey in the banking world, or Senator Bryan in the construction world, or me in professional services. Scope creep kills projects. Criterion is the mission objective, how we align, and the tool of accountability from the beginning. To that end, I also think that it's okay to evolve the criterion to make a site suitable, as long as we're dealing in apples and oranges and not apples and bowling balls. Can you help me understand how that criterion changed over time, and if is that still appropriate criterion to this day? If you could redo it, where we ended up is we're in the right place for us to be shovel ready to build a prison.
I think one of the things that was possibly misunderstood is that we, while we were looking at the commercially listed real estate that was listed for sale, we were also trying to figure out where could we find sites that would be potentially suitable. And when we did our analytic, we built a very large model using the county assessor records from the various assessors across the state. It's 1.8 million plus records, and so we needed a way to narrow that down. We started by selecting large tracts, and then we looked for large tracts single owner, and then we had, as Ann pointed out earlier, we had over 25,000 candidates, and there's no way that an individual could look through 25,000 candidates. So we made an assumption that if we looked for tracts that were situated within a couple of miles of U.S. or interstate highway, that would help narrow our field. We did that. Go from 25,000 down to 6,000 candidates, and that's where we were at. In the 6,000 candidates, we started to focus our efforts on the upper end of the Arkansas River Valley and looking at those sites that were in that 2-mile window around the interstates. But that didn't preclude that we weren't looking at other candidates that were on other state highways. And so that's an example where the Franklin County folks, maybe misunderstood that a little bit. That interstate access, while it would have been great, it was not a hard rule requirement for Department of Corrections. That was a guideline that we built in to our model to help narrow down the field, if that makes sense.
Okay, and appreciate that. I'm going to tighten up a little bit on my time. I've got the board loaded up. Some's dropped off, some come back on. Let me just mention real quick something I struggle with during session when we were voting. Yeah, you spent, I say you, the state spent $3 million on a piece of land. Presented in the presentation, everybody knows they've been offered their money back. What I have said, you could pay $20 million for another piece of land that had more infrastructure from somebody that might not talk to you about that low ball figure that you're wanting to buy. That we all want to bargain, and $3 million is still a lot, but you could spend more money, and in the scope of what's going to be spent on a project, it'd still be affordable. So I'm not asking for a deal. I just want to throw that out. That was mine. I tried to present that during the session. I never got anybody to admit that's true, but I still think it was. I'm going to go to Senator King, and if you all will, keep it to 1-2 questions, and we'll get back in the queue. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I've been around a while, been through forestry scandal, Bill Walker scandals, University of Arkansas scandals. I understand the people in the middle, and by Mr. Porfiry not showing up, that's where the real questions are going and who really should be grilled. I understand you work for the governor, you do everything, been around a while. But my question is to you, in this whole discussion, I've talked about these mega prisons as somebody's worked on it since 2017 and addressing this budget-wise and everything to take care of this, is you look at Utah, Alabama, all these mega prisons are mega disasters. Every one of them have been. They go into promise and everything. Was there any discussion about looking at previous mega prisons that were built in Utah, Alabama? Was there any discussion, do you remember, about looking in those things about what happened?
Yes, sir. I think we did do that. In fact, that is why we did decide to bring on an owner's rep, so we could get the expertise working directly with the team. The owner's rep was not being hired to do our site selection for us. They were going to help with site assessment, but we went out looking for a site. But we wanted to bring that owner's rep on that had direct experience with a correctional facility construction, so that we could avoid those pitfalls and mistakes that others had made, that we could learn, the designs are there. We don't have to go out and reinvent the wheel. We knew there were plenty of very well-designed facilities that we could work with. And so that's why we had identified the acreage that we needed, that we felt would accommodate the number of beds that were needed. And we were going to work with the cookie cutter. So we were learning from those mistakes, learning from those designs that had been developed. And so we had a pretty good understanding of how we could start that process. And the owner's rep was brought on to help us to facilitate that, carry us through that process as efficiently as we could.
Okay, like I said, I understand who you work for and what you got to do and the message you got to present. And Mr. Porfiry and Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say, well, looks like we've got a better chance of getting Jeffrey Epstein here to talk about child sex trafficking than they do Mr. Porfiry, who's paid almost $250,000 a year salary and benefits and has been the central person. I just saw him in the Capitol earlier today, so he's around.
We'll address that here in a minute. Senator Dismayne, you recognize, and then Representative Kavanaugh after that.
All right, thank you. And so just to make sure I understand, there was another site you all looked at it as soon as they found out you were looking to, purchase for the prison, the price went up.
There was one particular site that, yes, sir, that did happen. Others, we weren't even able to get the owners to agree to even negotiate with us to put them under contract.
So the shocker is that once it becomes public that you're looking to buy a particular piece of property, probably the details of that transaction change and not in the favor of the buyer.
That's correct.
One question I have is, because I think I've seen it, but it's been a little while because we're removed from session now at this point, but there was an allocation for wastewater and water and I think that may have come in, not like I said, as far as the assessment of the site.
Right.
Do you recall what those dollar numbers were for what it would take to get water, what we kind of budgeted for? And again, I know that I may be on the wrong group because you were looking at the purchase side, not the assessment after the fact.
I don't recall.
I'm not aware of those numbers, Senator.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, thank you.
Representative Kavanaugh, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, over here. One of the criteria for the site was community buy-in, and that's one in particular that interests me more than some of the other things we're hearing. Can you tell us how you determined community buy-in for this site when it was selected?
That was not in our lane. Our role was on the recommendations, looking at other criteria. And so that criteria was, we were looking at the physical characteristics, and that social aspect was not something that we were directly involved in. So I'm sorry I can't answer your question.
Who was to make that determination about? So if we're going to ask that question, ultimately, who was the person responsible for determining and how they determined community buy-in?
The owner's representative was going to help with that process.
Who?
So the owner's representative that was under contract. That was one of the roles that they were going to play, was to carry us through that process with the community. But it was not something that our offices were going to be directly involved with.
Okay,
They would do that
and
with
I
the
don't want to
Department of
sound
Corrections.
rude.
Yes, ma'am.
But it's not up to the owners to determine community buy-in for the state of Arkansas. Someone within the state should have been making the determination about what the community's feeling were for this. Because I know there are lots of communities that would have loved to have it because it's going to be an economic boom, and I don't disagree with that. But one of the core contentions we have here with this site is community buy-in. And are you trying to say there wasn't anybody in the state that was looking at community buy-in? They were just looking at the physical location, but they weren't really looking at community buy-in?
Representative, our responsibility did not include the community buy-in. That was not, like Mr. Johnson said, that was not a role that we were going to play. But yes, ma'am, it was going to happen with the state. That was the next step that was coming, but it was not in our list of responsibilities.
Okay, whose responsibility was that?
The owner's representative that was hired was going to be working directly with Department of Corrections to carry it through that process.
So a Department of Corrections was the one it was supposed to be finding. That's what I'm trying to find out. In the state, the Department of Corrections are the one that was supposed to be working on how to determine community buy-in.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Kavanaugh, if I may, you raised a point that I think is worth diving into just briefly. You mentioned the other communities that did want to bring a location, and we looked at those. The Department of Corrections had put out an invitation to communities across the state in late 2022, and the records that we got from that were from Marshall and Searcy County. They had offered up 40 acres. That was near the end of their runway at their airport. City of Fordyce had a 35-acre site that was right on the edge of town. And then both Hope and Prescott teamed together, and they had two viable sites from a physical aspect that were in Hempstead County. And when we looked at those, they were 28 miles down the road from the DOC site that's in Texarkana. And then when we looked at the workforce figures that were for that particular location, it was like a little over 36,000 workforce. And so while it is true to say that there were other communities that did want a location, they didn't, the sites just, they weren't viable.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get everybody on the board. I'm going priority to committee members. Representative Poirier, you're recognized.
It's kind of a financial question. If you folks can't answer it, hopefully someone from your department will. So just two quick ones. How much total money has been spent on this project as of right now, including land purchase and all that? And then I'll follow that up with approximately how much money is it going to cost us for you to tell us how much this is going to cost us?
Well, we don't have the funding for the project. So we know that the property purchase was done for, I think, around 2.9 million, 2.75, and then with fees, I think it was close to 2.9 million, and that transaction was done through Arkansas Development Finance Authority. That's the only, I guess, expense that we've been associated with directly. Most of the other work we did without a budget, and so we did it without actually expending dollars. We did it through our state resources. As far as being able to get a true estimate or getting the design completed to get an estimate, that will fall, of course, with the design team, which are currently on hold right now.
I might now add that for our work on the site selection, it was the cost was our time, and we were able to work that in with our other work. So while we maintained our existing workload on 911 and some of the other work that we do, it fell toward the end of the calendar year around the holidays, and our work with cities and counties slows down a lot during that holiday window that's like late December. And so a lot of our work was done in that latter part of the year. So for as far as the site selection cost, our work, it was just our time, sir.
Okay. I appreciate one quick follow-up, Chair.
Go ahead.
So I appreciate that and covers several departments, but I do think if there's folks here, and I don't know who's supposed to be here or not here to answer that, but if you are here, I think those are two good questions that would be great to all this committee to hear, so appreciate that.
Thank you. Senator Hill, you dropped off. Okay. Senator Mark Johnson, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a quick question for the chair and then another quick question for our witnesses. Mr. Chairman, there's been some complaints about Mr. Porphyry not being here. He was invited, and I assume that was by the co-chairs.
He was invited by the co-chairs agreements, and staff did that and did not hear back.
Okay. So the fact that he is an employee of the governor and not an agency, then he and she would certainly have the ability to not attend because of the separation of powers issue. Am I reading that correctly? As opposed to someone who would be subpoenaed and certainly.
I would allow you to make your own assumptions. The thing about the legislative body approved funding for him the first time that he took on that role, and then after that may have got wrapped into the governor's budget. I think it is a slap at this body not to even answer us and say he cannot be here or whatever, but we'll take a possible motion on that when these two witnesses get through.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll now address the question to Ms. Laidlaw and Mr. Johnson. One of you said something about a site that was very good, but the owner, in effect, was not interested in selling. Did we somehow or another lose the right of eminent domain that could be used in this? Because I'm thinking, yes, it'd be nice if you had someone that really had a great parcel and wanted to sell it. On the other hand, the cost of the dirt is one of the nominal costs of wherever this is located. When we're talking about, $500 million for this and water and all the other infrastructure things, was eminent domain off the table when you were doing this study?
The Division of Building Authority doesn't have the power of eminent domain anywhere other than Pulaski County.
Can you say that one more time?
We only have that power within Pulaski County. We do not have it statewide.
We meaning your agency,
Division of Building
but not
Authority.
the Department of Corrections or our state government. Am I reading that correctly?
I'm not aware of that capability, but I can speak from just our work. We were not looking at sites where you were going to go to that level, because that gets you into the challenge of working through just compensation. And we kind of made the conscientious decision, at least for our part of the work in the modeling, is there's got to be a site out there. Let's go find it. And then you wouldn't be in the position of exercising eminent domain.
Well, and I think it's clear that, we have a few folks here that didn't want it to be in their backyard. And I can understand that. But it's going to have to go in someone's backyard if we're going to have a prison. And I'm thinking that maybe we looked at this a little bit inside out instead of outside in. And I'm wondering, I just think it should be on the table that if you find a site that otherwise works, since again the acreage and all that is a nominal. It's not insignificant, but comparatively speaking, it's relatively insignificant cost of this. All the infrastructure things are really what seems to be, so I just want to make sure that that wasn't ignored in the process. And Ms. Laylaw, the fact that your agency only has eminent domain in Pulaski County, I get that, but these are the kind of things that, can be worked out. I mean, I worked in an agency once where we exercised eminent domain. There wasn't any question whether we could take a property. Now, you get a right of entry, and the judge would say, okay, we're going to have a trial, and we're going to determine what the compensation is. But there was never any question that the state could take it. And I hope that didn't cause either a delay or something improper, not blaming y'all or anybody on that, but I'm just trying to, your agencies made a decision in effect to say, there's plenty of places out here that seem to want it, and we think we can find one that might work without having to look at condemning property. Am I understanding your answer correctly?
Correct. We did not consider condemning property.
Okay, all right. You answered it. I disagree with the decision, but I appreciate your candor. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, members, try to be as concise as we can for time. Going to committee member Representative Mary Bentley, and then going to Senator Ricky Hill after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cindy Crawford, right here. I'm in Mary's chair.
Well,
I'm on the committee.
Are you on the committee?
Yes.
Thank
Someone
you.
had my chair, so I had to sit in Mary's.
You are recognized.
Thank you. For the first time, I like an answer you gave, that we're not going to take people's property. Thank you for that. I think we as a body need to realize that we are not here to take property away from people. And that, the Senator, is ridiculous. If we are going to take property away from people, we don't need to be here. And so I would ask you, do you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
You through? Thank you. Senator Ricky Hill.
Going back to what we've been looking at and talking about throughout this, you mentioned that y'all went through all the different properties and everything, trying to find the right size, close to where it is and everything. How is it that a solar company, a crypto mining company can come in and they designate the area where they want to be, and they can go in and buy property in those areas where the infrastructure is already set up for them? Yes, you have to pay a little bit more, but it saves you in the long run because you don't have to. Why did we not look at something like that where you found what you wanted with the infrastructure there that's already said, where they've got the water, they've got the sewer, they've got everything, they can accommodate it, and just pay a little more for the land because someone will sell it to you in that area. That'll save you. It may cost you, instead of $3 million, it may cost you $20 million, but you're going to spend a lot more than that on the infrastructure. Why can we not do like a public company and search that way?
Are you referring to the site? We did find the site that actually was purchased. Is that the site you're referring to?
I'm just referring to overall. Why didn't y'all go out and say, we need 2,000 acres of land, whatever you need, and go to an area where they have the power lines already running through there, your main substations, they've got the sewer and everything, and buy it that way instead of saying, hey, let's go build a city. Why didn't we look at doing it that way? Because your infrastructure, yes, it's going to cost you more up front. You know that going into it, but it's going to save you in the long run when you do your due diligence before you make an offer. You know, hey, we can buy this property for X amount of money. Everything's here. It sounds to me like we didn't do our homework on the front end, and now we're trying to do it on the back end.
It's a very, very fair question, Senator Hill, and that property that you just described is in a city.
Okay. Well, you didn't offer enough money for it then, because you would have got it bought if you would have tried to.
No, I didn't mean specifically. Right. What I meant was generically. Yeah. What you're describing, where all of the infrastructure is already there, is going to be more than likely inside a municipal boundary, because the municipality has taken on that challenge of bringing sewer to that location for municipal purposes. The water's there for municipal purposes. Those kinds of infrastructure, that would normally be, all of those things that we would all have desired for the perfect site would almost always be inside one of our municipalities.
Okay, let's take a farming area. I know this, I'm just going to throw a town out, England, Arkansas. You've got workforce on Little Rock. You've got water. You've got your infrastructure there. I'm just throwing that one out there. You know, yes, it is possible.
26 miles from Dermont.
Yeah.
Or not Dermont, excuse me, Brightsville, my
I
bad.
just used that town as an example.
Sure.
Right.
I just grabbed it out of the air.
We ruled out a lot of Arkansas was ruled out because of DOC's criteria that said we want to be further away than 60 miles from one
Well,
of their existing.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, you may just think of another town or another name of a town that could work as far as in West Arkansas. I just used England as an example.
Yeah.
I could have used Lone Oak.
Yeah, the upper end of the river valley was really the region that we centered on and focused in on. If you think long range, 50 years out from now, that'll be at the intersection of I-40 and I-49. It will be an area that is growing. Its population will continue to grow, and so those cities and towns that are on the upper end of the Arkansas River Valley would be in our high target areas that we were really looking for those sites. Though that would be like not in these cities, but near these cities: Alma, Van Buren, Fort Smith, Barling, Lavaca, Greenwood. I'm trying to think of all of them off the top of my
And
head.
we
Sorry, I
did
can't
look
remember
at,
all.
Yeah, we did look at a number of sites there, and there were several of those that did hit our top tier. But getting to the point of being able to get a contract, we were not able.
Would you please talk in the mic where I can hear
I
you?
said we did have a number of those areas in our short list and our top tier. We were not able to get to a contract with those owners. In fact, one of them we found out actually had the future highway was going to be running right through it, or interstate was going to be running right through it. So we were really close on the target on that one, but we have sites that were eliminated. We weren't able to get them under contract.
Have y'all estimated how much more it's going to cost us now overall than if you could have gotten that facility bought?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going to Representative Long, and then Representative Beatty, Representative Richmond, and then Representative Longstrom. Representative Long, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank y'all for showing up. I had a couple of questions. One, was there ever any consideration to doing like 3 different 1,000-bed prison sites? Since we basically wouldn't need nearly as much water in different areas like that.
That's actually a programming matter for the department. We were not, that wasn't a part of our decisions that we were working with. So no, sir, we did not personally do that. We were looking for a site that would accommodate the correctional facility that we were asked to look for.
Okay. And next question, what was the total acres of this site in Franklin County?
825?
It was originally listed for 825, but after land survey, it pared down to 810.
Okay. And they had a topo map up earlier, but it didn't have any slopes listed. Any idea what the average slope is on this lot? 'Cause I've never been to that area or even really seen any photos of it.
I don't know I don't remember the slope off of the top of my head. It's south facing, and I would describe it as gentle to rolling. There are other people who would describe it as steep, and I guess that's your perspective. But if you go to the site exhibit that was a part of the packet, you can find the contour information in there, and also there's a terrain model in there that allows you to see what the terrain looks like.
Well, on the USDA soil description, I was looking at it, and it looked like the Ender series and the Linker series was the only 2 that had suitable soils as far as depth of rock to do like a subsurface septic system. Are y'all looking at strictly just doing off-site surface discharge type system?
I think from day one, DOC has probably, and I sure don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think that their expectation was that they would be doing treatment on site, building wastewater treatment on site.
And discharging into a creek, I guess?
To be determined.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, and members, just to tell you where we're at. We're coming up on 3:30. It was my goal to start winding down by 4:30 and get out of here by 5. We've got a full board. I've still got BOC Chairman Benny Magnus and member Lee Watson to bring up. Please keep that in mind. Representative Biddy, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Johnson, kind of a question. In the presentation from the group, we heard some comments about workforce and the numbers that they used, around 108,000 on the workforce. Could you speak to the workforce and your study, if you prepared those numbers? Could you give us some information on that?
Yes,
the
sir.
Total workforce.
Yeah, and I think that the citizens accurately described when I spoke with the consultant that did that work for. That consultant worked for a company that ended up locating here in Little Rock, and that facility was a large employer, and it was an industrial manufacturing facility. And rightly, the citizens determined that I did not understand their math, and that's because I read the way they presented it literally. After studying that and looking at how you might want to segment the workforce, we made a raw assumption, and it was a very simplistic assumption. And what drives workforce more than anything, especially in Arkansas, is willingness to commute. And we know, the reason we know that is because of our other mapping work that we do from time to time. And I'm going to give you a really good example. When we had the solar eclipse, we mapped our state's workforce, state employees, and where they're at and where they're willing, how far they're willing to drive. And we mapped our own workforce because we thought a lot of our workforce is going to want to see this event. And what we found is that a large part of our workforce lives quite far away from work. We narrowed in on about a 30-mile drive distance, what we call a drive shed. And what we did was we calculated that 30-mile drive shed from the various sites that we looked at, and then we overlaid the U.S. Census blocks that were inside that 30-mile driving distance, and then we just counted up the total population in that drive shed and then the population age 18 plus in that drive shed. And so that then allowed us, once we had that model built, we could plug coordinates in for any site and run that model really fast and be able to evaluate any other sites. And so I have a bunch of those exhibits that I could show you.
We're going to need to shorten our answers
yes, sir.
a little bit.
I'll stop at that.
Does that cover it?
Well, I would have liked to heard a little more, but I think basically that addresses the question. You did look at workforce, and that workforce study would reach out to the Fort Smith area as far as a commute back and forth to the proposed site.
Yes, sir. At that particular location, we found out that it would even reach a little bit into Oklahoma.
Oh, thank you. And then the final question, we also heard some remarks made as far as fire protection in that area. Can either of you speak to the fire protection that could be provided for that site?
One of the things that we learned in our visits with our colleagues at DOC is that it's very regular for them to build their own fire capabilities on campus, within the campus. And so fire is a concern. Certainly, we want to have robust public safety. We also learned that, as you would expect, sometimes accidents happen during discussion or construction. And so you would want some capability there, at least somewhere nearby, for in the event of a construction accident. And so that's kind of why we were looking at that twofold: help with fire suppression for wildland fire, and then on campus you would have that contained, and then you would have just the run-of-the-mill emergency response with volunteer first responders, which would come from those neighboring nearby departments.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Richardson, you dropped off. Go ahead. Okay. I thought it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is this. The email said that you found it not viable. Was that one of you guys who?
That was me.
Okay. What changed? if you thought it was not viable 90 days before you did that, what changed your mind to say that it is?
It was my drive to the property using Highway 96.
Say that one more time.
It was my drive to the property where I used Highway 96 to access the property. And when a team more experienced than I went back out and looked at it, they used Highway, I guess, 22. And that's where we determined that most of the workforce would be using 22 out of both Sebastian County and beyond.
Pull your
So-
microphone up closer
I'm
to
sorry.
you. My people over here
Okay,
holler.
sorry. I chose Highway 96 instead of Highway 22 to access the property.
And it was also stated that, I think Senator King said that the road had grass come up and they got to redo the road, or is that
was
inaccurate?
96. That was Highway 96,
Thank
yes,
you.
sir.
Thank you, Representative Longstrom, and then Representative Wooten.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. You had mentioned a few cities. What cities were those again?
We had looked at, in addition to the Franklin County, we also were in Clarksville, Alma, Fort Smith. Did I leave any out?
Greenwood,
Greenwood and
Huntington, Mansfield.
that we looked
Rudy.
at sites. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want all of them?
I'm just writing them
the
down.
top
I'm just
tier.
curious, out of all those cities, and they wanted the prison to come in their backyard.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am, I didn't mean to insinuate that earlier. I was, when I was speaking with, addressing Senator Hill, what I was meaning was those were locations where you would have all of that infrastructure, but they would be, within a municipality.
Okay. Is there something wrong with having it within a municipality? We have manufacturing and other things in a municipality. I understand there's some municipalities that wanted to have the prison. Who are those?
The municipalities that expressed an interest and provided a proposal were Fordyce,
Okay.
Marshall in Searcy County, and then Prescott Hope teamed together on sites that were, one was in Hempstead County, and the other one was pretty close by in neighboring Nevada County, just across the county line.
Okay. So, and they wanted to have those.
Yes, ma'am. And as I mentioned earlier, all of those were,
Within
the reality is they were all in the wrong spot.
in the radius of the other correctional facilities. Except for the Marshall, and it was not large enough.
It was 40 acres.
Right, it was 40 acres.
So we're worried about cannibalizing employees. Why not just pay them all enough that we'd want to have more employees? I mean, I'm not understanding why we'd worry about that, and if we could just pay folks to come to work.
At a big picture scale, it's sustainability of population. If you look at, and I've actually prepared this for one of the board members. Let me.
Actually, staffing, obviously, Department of Corrections would be better suited in answering that question.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate that.
The information I can share really off the top of my chart here is that from 2019 to 2023 on our population, 11 of our current DOC facilities are in counties where the population is declining.
Mm-hmm.
That's a population decline area. Then when we jump forward and we look jump backwards to look at the period 2010 to 2019, 13 out of our, so in that last decade, 13 out of our 20 DOC facilities are in population decline counties. And so the best way I can express it is that 100 years ago, our prisons were mostly in the right place. Fast forward, they're not all in the right place anymore. And it's because of our population growth, which is toward western and northwestern Arkansas.
Don't argue that at all. I see it every day in Northwest Arkansas.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I'll hop out and get back in if I need to. Thank you.
And if you wanted to try to put that in Northwest Arkansas, Representative Longstrom probably help you. I've got her back in the queue already. Okay, members, I've got three plus Representative Longstrom. I'm going to go to. Please be as quick as you can. I'm going to wrap these up. We've got two more that I want to get to. Representative Wooten, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll try not to use my coaching voice, but I want clarification on one question did you say that you cut it down to 2 miles within an interstate?
In our modeling, we were looking at that to try to narrow the total numbers that we were trying to sift through.
Okay, so with 1,000 miles of interstate in Arkansas, roughly, it's actually 9,885 or 985. You couldn't find a site.
Not further than 60 miles from one of the existing prisons, which was one of our other criteria.
But you could find the site.
We did.
Okay. Well, no, but it's 23.3 miles off the interstate.
No, we did find sites that were on interstate.
Well, did you share that with the governor's office
We reported all the sites.
or the
Yes, sir.
Department of Correction?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's fine. My next question is, do you still, and you may not be able to answer this, but do you still stand by the $825 million number?
That's not our role. I'm sorry, sir.
Do what?
That's not our role in this, is to clarify or to quantify the cost for the correctional facility.
I could not understand what you said.
That's really not our role to be able to clarify or justify the cost for the prison facility. We're just
Okay.
working with the property.
So the $825 million, is that number viable from the governor's office or the Department of Correction? Can you answer that,
I believe that.
being a state agency?
I believe the Department of Correction with their owner's representative came up with that number. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Rye, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's people in this room that can remember only a few years ago that we were working on matching money for highways. If we come up with 50, the feds would come up with 200 million. We barely made that. Now, we've got counties that we're paying around $40 a person to be incarcerated, but we're going to spend 85,000 on your proposed way of doing things. You know, I just wonder if we've really checked this out like we should. Thank you.
Representative Matt Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had mentioned an 8-inch water line. Where was that at? You had two highways. Was it 215 and Highway 217?
Yes.
I think that's right. Let me double check that for you, sir. Yeah, it comes up to it comes up alongside James Road, and it comes up to a tower that is on a tank that's on Ridge Road.
Do you know about how far that is from the location?
Yeah, it's a little over 2 miles.
And then, follow up, Mr. Chair. Earlier, there was some testimony about there wasn't any power out there, but I mean, it looks to me like there's a high voltage line that crosses the middle of the property. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, members, my board went blank. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Chair, I didn't get a 100% opportunity to respond to Senator Hill's original
Okay, if you'll
question, the very one.
wrap that up quickly.
Yes, sir. I'll be very quick. I just wanted to acknowledge my team that worked on this. I had a total of 8 staff working on this, assisting in the project. 3 of those staff hold master's degrees in agriculture, forestry, and community and regional planning. 6 of my staff hold bachelor's degrees in geography, political science, and history. I have 1 registered forester on staff. I have 1 person on my staff that's a level 4 a certified appraiser from the Assessment Coordination Division. And I also have 2 licensed surveyors. When we put that team all together, I have over 100 years of combined experience in the career. And so I would like to make sure that the committee is aware that we did have experience.
Thank you all. Okay, members, quick break before I bring the last 2 up. and let me just state this, if you'll listen to me just a minute. It's evidently been said that my co-chair and I were contacted that Mr. Profuri was not going to be here. That is false. I was contacted by Governor Stafford yesterday. My co-chair was contacted by a different Governor Stafford yesterday and mentioned that Mr. Johnson, Ms. Laidlaw were going to be here. And I said, thank you. They said, I just wanted to notify the chairs. I said, I appreciate that. I did not ask specifically, and they did not mention Mr. Profuri's name. So at this time, I will entertain a motion. It will take a 2/3 vote of separate houses. Since the Senate's chairing today, it'll be the Senate first. I'll entertain a motion to authorize the co-chairs to begin the process issuing a subpoena as authorized by law. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Do I have a second in the Senate? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, members, I've heard House over here. House can't vote in this. Separate chambers. Y'all have your chance, the Senate does. Senate, members of the committee only. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It fails. Thank you. Next up, we have Chairman of Board of Corrections, Benny Magnus. If you come up, and Board of Corrections member Lee Watson, we're requested to be here. We appreciate y'all being here. We appreciate your patience. Not the first time y'all been to the table, so you know the routine. And while you're standing, let me issue that. If you'll punch that microphone and tell us your name first.
My name is Benny Magnus.
Did you punch the button there? There you go. Now.
My name is Benny Magnus with the Arkansas Board of Corrections.
Okay.
My name is Lee Watson with the Arkansas Board of Corrections.
Okay, thank you. If you raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank both of you. Please take a seat. Do you gentlemen have any statements?
No, sir. Just here to ask your question.
Appreciate that. And first up, I have Representative Mayberry. You're recognized.
There we go. Thank you so much for allowing me to ask a question. So it kind of got mentioned, Representative Long asked the question, and I just want to expand a little bit more because I think this is probably a little bit more in your wheelhouse. So is this just too big of a project? 3,000 prison bed prison? Was there ever discussion when finding the location was becoming difficult, that maybe we don't need 3,000 all in one spot, that we need to separate it into 3 1,000-bed prisons? What was that ever discussion before, or were we just so set on it's got to be all in one place? And moving forward, is that possibly a solution so we can divide out the workforce and possibly find a place that has water enough to meet? I'll just kind of open that up and see if you can answer.
Well, I'll try to answer it. You'd have to go back to some of the historical ways we participated in trying to build prisons in the past or attempted to build prisons. I was involved in the new prison construction at Malvern, Arkansas, and we did it similar to what we started in prior to this administration taking over. We put out feelers to ask people to apply, for communities to apply, and that at that point, it was, at that time, we were looking at possibly a 1,500 bed facility, if I remember correctly, and so that shortly after the administration that's here now seen a need of more beds of 3,000. Sometimes in the larger facilities are more cost efficient to run or to build, because Each facility has to have a school. Each facility has to have kitchens. So when you build multiple ones, you multiply.
We were looking at, as I remember, it was 1,002 to 1,500 beds. And then when our new secretary came in, that was all pushed to the side, and the march was on for a 3,000-bed facility.
Quick follow-up. Do you think that that might be a feasible option moving forward if we're talking, I understand the cost, it makes sense, one kitchen, one school, et cetera, but if we're not going to be able to have the water to get there to meet the needs of a 3,000-bed prison and having to spend so much more on those other infrastructure things, might it be something to look at choosing 3 different locations or some other variable like that? Is that something that you all will consider?
Absolutely. I think the main thing, we need more beds. I mean, I think that's something everybody in the room behind us, and behind me, in front of me, everybody can agree upon. We need more beds as quickly as we can add beds. We've added almost 1,500 more beds into facilities, but I will tell you today, I looked at the numbers, our Department of Corrections facilities are filled to 109% capacity. That's not safe for the officers, it's not safe for the inmates, it's not safe for the general public. So we do need to move. And a while back, I wrote a letter to some members of the legislature, and my focus was, how can we most rapidly add beds? We've squeezed everybody in we can, and if we can most rapidly add 500 beds at Calico Rock and 1,000 beds wherever with the plan, as soon as the money is available, design it like you would a school or anything else that might expand, to add another 1,000 wing as soon as you can, then however we get there the fastest is the most important and most valuable to all of us, I think.
Okay, thank you. Senator Josh Bryant, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess only one question that I had based on this presentation from the citizens group is there's a statement, I think it was item number 3 of a slide that said to reduce the minimum requirements for basically the rehabilitation and the classrooms down to minimum ACA standards. Can you explain what that means in terms of footprint? And was that a board decision or was that an executive branch governor's decision?
ACA, I'm sure you're talking about American Correctional Association when you use that term. They do have guidelines for us for sales on how many feet of area for each inmate. Proudly enough, the state of Arkansas is ACA accredited in every unit we have. And not all states are 100% accredited in all their facilities. We are. And so, in building the prison, it's not been determined yet how hard you build that prison. And what that means is whether you're building 50-man barracks, 25-man barracks, 2-man cells. There's so much that comes into the building of a prison to be able to operate it, and also to build it with what money and needs you need. So people in corrections, professionals, like to have single-man cells. They're easy to maintain, very expensive. And Arkansas probably cannot afford to have a facility. We have one that's almost single-man cell. It's called North Max. We can't hardly afford that in our facilities to go that far hardened.
Okay, do you know if that, or at one time were we anticipating doing more than what the minimum standards were to create a system that was different than Varner Cummins unit, or less, maybe less hard, is just as secure, but more about pushing out rehabilitation programs, and then we've shrunk it, or has that never really been
I
a
don't
discussion?
recall the board ever being involved in that sort of conversation.
Ms. Laidlaw made several statements a few times about that they were working with DOC. We had, the board had laid out some floor mats of not so close to another unit to rob our staff. We did set some criteria, but when she said she was talking to DOC, I can only assume that she was talking to Secretary Perfia, because he wasn't including us in on those conversations or those decisions.
Okay. And then final question, just because I've only been to Varner Cummins about 3 times for a tour, just to understand it. I've never really went and looked at the utility side of a Supermax. My understanding is it's served by three wells, and that there's the appropriate treatment at the wellheads to feed that facility. A facility like this that does not have access to that type of well water, I assume we have prisons that use 500,000 gallon towers that are fed by an 8-inch line that will more than enough sustain the capacity issues for a prison and refill overnight. Or do we feed all our wells directly with just a hard line?
About half of our facilities are on municipal water, and half of them are on their own water. Calico Rock has 2 wells, and one is 1,285 feet deep, and one of them is 750 feet deep. And both of those feed a water tank, I forget what size, be way over 100,000 gallons.
Okay, and how big is that facility?
It's right at, it's rated for 850. We have 900 and something in there right now.
Okay, and then as far as the wastewater, treated on site at most of those facilities, or use a municipal system?
Yeah, and that was what raised the cost of Calico Rock after we did our study in the expanding it. We were at our maximum on our wastewater, and we were going to have to update and expand our wastewater to be able to expand that other 400 and some inmates at Calico Rock, because we were, and that's what raised our cost up. Some cost of the building supplies and the wastewater plant caused us to have to give a figure of right around 125 million to Governor Hutchinson.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
And Representative Bryant, we're glad you were just taking a tour and visiting, not wanting to be a permanent resident. Representative Purrier, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just go back to, would you gentlemen be able to answer a financial question?
We'll try.
Okay. You may not be in the room when I asked it earlier, but what's the total amount of money as of right now that we've spent on this project?
Sir, it's not about
approximate.
It's what the legislature and executive branch gives us to build with. So if that's 825 million, we may not be able to get but 2,600 beds out of that 825 million.
No, I appreciate that response. I'm not that complicated of a question. Just how much have we spent on this project approximately right now? Not what can we build with what? Just
Okay.
kind of curious how far we are into this.
I don't think I can answer that question without Mr. Brown,
Okay.
our accountant here.
Well,
And-
I can give a little bit of information. Part of what was testified to earlier was the purchase price of the property.
I'm aware of that, yes, sir.
And I did check, and with Vanner, I think we've spent somewhere between 900, well, pardon me, they've billed us for 900 and some odd thousand. I think 830 or so has been paid.
We've declined some of those
Right.
charges.
Some of the charges,
So
the things
we're-
that were in the media were,
Safe to say
back
we're
down.
under $5 million as of today. That'd be under 5 million?
yes.
Okay. And do we know, we talk about what the water is going to cost and all that, and I understand but what are we going to have to spend to find out those approximate costs of getting the water here, getting the electric lines upgraded, sewer plant, all the infrastructural costs alongside the building? What are we going to have to spend to find those numbers, roughly?
I don't have an answer for you. We don't have our engineer or architect hired yet for this, for that project to start going out trying to get those numbers for us, and we just don't have that answer for you.
Okay, so, well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Payton, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So y'all are both board members, and there's an accusation made in these complaints that while the board removed Mr. Profuri and he was replaced by Secretary Wallace, that they're both sharing the duties, or maybe Secretary Wallace is not able to fulfill the secretarial role, and that it says specifically Mr. Profuri is skirting his firing by the Board of Corrections by continuing at the helm of the Department of Corrections. Can you speak to that complaint? Who's running the Department of Corrections? Or
I think that I think that Mr. Perfia works for the governor and Secretary Wallace works for us. And that's the best way I can answer it for you.
so how much duplicity is there in their two roles at this point?
How much they do together?
No, how much does it overlap? If you're giving them something to do and the governor's giving them something to do, how much overlap is there?
Well, we don't give Mr. Porfiry anything to do, and in fact, we have almost no communication with him, and have had no communication since he was exited by the board.
Okay.
So we do know that.
So specifically where this complaint says Mr. Porfiry is skirting his firing by the Board of Corrections by continuing at the helm of the Department of Corrections, do you believe that to be true or not true?
He doesn't work for the Board of Corrections or Corrections now. He works for the governor. And if there any overlapping, he tours our facilities at time to time. And as a member of the governor's staff, he's entitled to tour our facilities. It would be very, we wouldn't ever, Board of Corrections would never try to say a member of the governor's office.
So if I
couldn't
could,
go.
just to be brief, let me try to frame it in a way where you can answer it. Who do you perceive is at the helm of the Department of Corrections?
Secretary Wallace.
Both of you agree in that? Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Representative Rose, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Watson, I just had a follow-up question on something that you said in your earlier testimony. I think it was in reference to, and I wasn't sure if it was to 3 sites specifically, or if it was a combination of expansions at different locations and additionally a site or 2, but some other form or fashion to getting somewhere to 2,500 or 3,500 beds. You said more or less whatever it takes to get this done the fastest. That's kind of the concept, is find the solution that gets it done the fastest.
We need beds.
Yes, and I think corporately, most are going to be in agreement that there is a problem with the number of prisoners we have and the places to put them. Overcrowding, the cost on the state and the counties for housing prisoners in county jails, and the inability maybe to effectively implement justice and imprison violent criminals et cetera, those common talking points I think we mostly broadly agree on. When you said get this done the fastest, do you have an adequate timeline that you could walk through of site location, the process of getting that done, purchasing, building, staffing, working with the community, what that timeline would look like?
Again, my 2 cents worth is the fastest way we could add beds would be to first and simultaneously work on expanding North Central. That's only 500 beds. We also need to look at, and when we talk about beds, keep in mind the word beds covers a multitude of types of beds. We don't just need prison beds, we also need community corrections and other facilities that make up some of those beds. And one of the things the board was considering back in 2022 was a facility for community corrections. Granted, it was only 300 beds, but that 300 beds would be 300 people that aren't in the county jail backup. And so we need to look at that. You know, we lost a facility in Washington County. You know, I'm from Fort Smith. I can tell you, also when it comes to location, part of the issue, and I can tell you from driving from Fort Smith to our facilities, there aren't any on my part of the state or in my part of the state. They're all south, they're all central Arkansas and east. And northwest Arkansas is the fastest growing. I know Benton and Washington County are predicted to double in population in the next, I think, less than 10 years. We're in need of some of those types of facilities in western and northwestern Arkansas. And I can tell you that Sebastian County per capita, I think, probably sends more people in the Department of Corrections of any county in the state, because we have a very aggressive and effective prosecutor there that I think you all know, Dan Shue. But as far as a timeline, you know, I think I would have to defer to Benny on that, because he saw what happened and he worked through the Malvern facility. I've not been actively involved in the construction of a new facility, and Benny has.
Usually takes from the time the site's picked to the time we open up 3 years, minimum. And that's not maximum, that's minimum. I don't believe we can get it done any quicker than that if we was turned loose tomorrow. But we, because of where we're at now, we're not getting it done. And, you know, a lot of the criteria that was talked about today, a good example, if a lot of people would come to Calico Rock and tour our facility, it's not near an interstate. It's probably 100 and some miles from interstate. It's not near a trauma center.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that site is similar to the site in Franklin County, and it works for us. We have excellent staff there. Yes, we had a Grant Hardin get away, which is the first time somebody walked away from that facility in 35 years. But they're excellent staff, and they do a good job. And so, but it's only 900, it's over capacity right now by about 70 or 80, maybe a little more. Around 900 something inmates there now. And, but it does work.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Quickly.
Thank you. Mr. Watson, I just kind of want to give you a chance to come back to this.
Sure.
Kind of the genesis of my question was you saying this would be the fastest way to get this done, or you want to see the fastest way to get this done. Mm-hmm. What is it that makes your proposal or that concept the fastest way to get it done?
Because a lot of the work is done at North Central. The architectural and engineering work is done. And we already have everything in place there to bring new staff on, because we have personnel there. That'd be the fastest way to add 500 beds. The faster way than building a facility that might take 3 years is community corrections facilities of might be 200 or 300 in various places that are where they're needed around the state. Again, it's not going to be the one Band-Aid that cures it all, but it takes away from the county jail backup, you know, however many 100 beds we can add.
One of the things that's important to say, when she brought up Marshall, Arkansas, that had made an application, in our document that we put out for people to be interested, or communities to be interested in some prison institutions, was also ACC centers, and they don't take the amount of ground because there are only 200 inmates, 300 inmates. They don't take the ground footprint that a prison does, and that's what Marshall was interested in. The Marshall was never interested, or could have staffed even. I think they could have staffed maybe a larger facility, but that's what they were interested in, something like 200 or 300 inmates. So when they say that Marshall applied, they didn't apply for a 1,000-bed prison, and they sure didn't apply for a 300-bed prison. They applied for an ACC center. So I think there's a little bit of mix-up there from knowing what Marshall was asking for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to hop back in if you get a moment.
Get back in the queue, please. Senator King, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, like I said, back in 2017, I filed the bill to address this overcrowding. I mean, this overcrowding's been happening for basically a long time, but it's really exploded starting back to 2011. And, just like in Rogers, when I asked you, I've always advocated in 2017 when, coming up with a plan that a lot of these people didn't want to fund. But if you increase, and this is why RSA in the budget is so important because it determines the direction. Corrections has stayed 8% of the budget since I went in. It was 8% this last time. I said in 17, said this, corrections should be 10% of the budget. If we'd increase 2% more since 2013 or whenever, corrections would have received $1.4 billion more dollars. That's how important 1% change in a budget goes in looking 10 years down the road. $1.4 billion, we wouldn't be in this mess. But back to Calico Rock, that's where, as you said, the fastest way to get there, Mr. Porphyry shut down Calico Rock. I mean, we've already got everything there that he shut down Calico Rock. We could expand it 525 beds, much faster, much more economical there. When you look at the inmate population, as we've seen, 4 counties contribute half our inmates to incarceration. So if you take out Pulaski County, which already has Wrightsville out here, Benton, Washington, Sebastian County, we need to build the facilities in Benton, Washington County, because if you look over a 50-year period, just the cost of transporting prisoners alone, and the other thing is, too, in looking at our needs that Mr. Porphyry didn't look at, is an intake facility. I mean, all the population is growing in northwest Arkansas. I mean, we're looking at the 3rd district next time may only be 3 counties. And so that thing that they never looked at, Porphyry, here we go.
Senator King, if you can finish your question.
Yeah, I know how this goes when you get faxes. So the question is, in looking at this thing, corrections is going to have their budget increase dramatically. It should have happened this line. If we don't do that, we are never going to solve this problem. And the second part is, why did Mr. Porphyry shut down Calico Rock expansion, which was economical? What do you know? He won't show up.
Again, you'd have to ask him that question. And as far as funding from the Department of Corrections is up to the governor and to this legislative body. We try to do the best we can with the money you all give us. And that's the only way I can answer that question.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying. The overcrowding that was happening in 15, 16 was because of lack of money going towards you guys, and I tried to correct that. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you.
The main thing that needs to be said here, every governor has given us some money. We've increased bed space with almost every governor I've served. I've been on the board 26 years. Every governor has gave us some money for some expansion, not new facilities. Governor Sanders' dad was the first one that gave us money for a brand new facility at Malvern. But we got money for expansion at Calico Rock, places in Pine Bluff. From every governor, we've added some beds. It's just we can't keep adding patchwork to places that we can't hire staff. That's the problem, is we have to go somewhere where we can hire staff. I can't go without saying that, I appreciate this governor. trying to build us beds. And if I was asked the question, what about 1,000s? I really don't care if it's built on a mountain, and I don't care how many. We have to have beds. Now, Senator King, before you jump in, I know there's a cost factor there. I get that. But we have to start having beds. Listen, I made the statement, we have 10,000 absconders that are not coming in. We catch them, we bring that number down every so month, and then it goes back up. Another thing that we've got facing us in the future is Protect Arkansas Act, when it was introduced and passed, it starts dealing with our repeat offenders, and it should. It should deal with our repeat offenders. The problem is we're not going to have a place to put them. And that cycle has not started yet. But it will. So I'll wait for a question now.
Thank you. Representative Wooten, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Chairman Magnus and Member Watson, I want to commend y'all. You've done an excellent job. I've seen the prison system and the changes that have been made, and it's outstanding with the limited finances that you've had. I have seen it from the standpoint of being a trooper and having to go into two riots, one at Cummins and one at Tucker, as a result of overcrowding. So I know. And then I served a stint as DFA director, and I have never seen such a disaster as has been perpetrated on the people of Arkansas relative to this 3,000-bed prison. Now to my question. Chairman Magnus, do you remember the conversation that we had in the lobby out here about 4 years ago?
I'm sure you're going to remind me.
Okay, it may have been. With age, I start narrowing the time frame down. But you told me then that we needed 2,000 beds and that we needed a unit 300 so we could incarcerate parolee violations, absconders, and drug users. They come into the facility and for parole violations or for parole review, and they come in and they're high on drugs, and your people have to let them go. Is that true?
Well, we built a facility. We bought a a juvenile facility at Batesville.
Right.
Batesville did not want to run it anymore. Independence County, I should say. And we bought it, remodeled it. Now we've got a 175-bed facility there for parole violators that we bring in for 90 days. We also have one next to the Malvern unit, Omega. And both of those function well. I sure wouldn't be against having another one. The one thing about parolees, if you can, studies will show you that when they are not complying with their parole requirements, the best thing you can do, instead of wait till they've got so far down the road that you have no other choice but send them to prison, is get a hold of them, put them in a facility, and give them 90 days. Hopefully they still have a job when they get out, but put them back out after 90 days. And that's served pretty well. We started that somewhere 22 years ago with Omega. So.
Thank you. Mr. Watson, I read in the paper your proposal. Have you presented that to the full board, or are you holding on to that, or what's the status of the proposal? And if you would, share what you felt we needed to do.
Well, pretty much what I've said today. If we need to find a way to add beds the fastest, whether it's North Central Community Corrections, and then however much of a prison, however many beds the legislature is willing to fund. Because as Benny pointed out, things are fairly, the growth is fairly predictable now, and it will be for the next 4 or 5 years, but it's expected that that's when the Protect Arkansas Act is going to have start having a greater impact on our prison population. And we need to get ready for that. So we can't just fix the problem we have today. We need to start planning for that for the future, for the next, 5 or more years, 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. Thank both of you again for your leadership and direction at the corrections. Mr. Chairman, regardless of how the Senate feels, I still think that we need to let them know over there and Mr. Forey that he is either going to come over here or we're going to take his pay away from him. And I don't care how the senators feel about it, but it's a slap in the face of every one of you. And you voted not to subpoena him to come in here. And that does not sit very well with me. And I know a lot of you don't care how things sit with me, but that's fine too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I understand the concern and have similar feelings. If you gentlemen will be sure you're getting a little relaxed. Pull your microphones to you and you can still be relaxed.
Okay.
Getting a little bit light. Representative Matt Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking of the follow-up on the comment on planning for the future, what is the current backlog in the county jails right now as we sit here today?
I'd say right around 2,200. I don't check it daily anymore, but it'll be hovering right around 2,200 backed up in the county jail.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair. So even if we added these 500 beds at Calico Rock, that's not really making a dent to the current backlog we have right now when we're already at 109% capacity, I think y'all said earlier. So, I mean, wouldn't it make more sense to build a new facility of 3,000 beds, regardless of where it's built? But wouldn't it make sense to build a facility where we can start, getting capacity for the future instead of another stopgap measure?
I think what we've seen for the last year and a half is that the efforts toward this 3,000 bed facility have derailed the plans to add a 500 bed facility or 500 beds at Calico Rock, some community corrections facilities that may add up to 1,000, and then serious work on a long-term, whether it's 1,000, with the design so that it can be expanded as the funds are available. But anyway, if we could get a 3,000 bed facility built faster than we can do any of those things, I'd be 100% for it.
Representative Brown, I have a different answer to that it depends on whether you built that 3,000 bed facility in segments. Mm-hmm. If you build it in segments, it would serve maybe the same person's position as adding Calico Rock. But if you try to build the whole facility as a whole, we're going to be in a lot more trouble, and the county's going to be in a lot more trouble waiting on that facility to open. But if you build it in segments, which I've talked to the Van Air and the contractor and stuff about doing it in segments. And that's the way it needs to be built to make some beds come online sooner.
Well, I mean, I don't care how it's built, if it's in phases or what. I mean, my concern is we literally have child rapists being let out of the pen because we don't have enough room. Why can't we put these people in jail and keep them there? It's to protect society.
Sir, the Board of Corrections doesn't let people out. Do we vote on the EPA to let them out 90 days early? Yes, we have, and done it for years. But then they are reviewed by the parole board. The Board of Corrections does not vote to put somebody out on the street. That's not our job, never has been our job. Now, we have voted to move their eligibility 90 days early because at the request of the county jails or whatever may be. If you go back in history, I didn't vote for all the EPAs. I didn't vote for them. But I can tell you right now that it's going to really hurt. If we did an EPA right now, we have two on the books. One is 90 days, which covers everyone. And we have one that is a 1 year, moves the eligibility date 1 year, and it has to be 100% nonviolent. Very restrictive who will qualify for that 1 year EPA. But then that goes, and I wish Mr. McCaslin here, our parole board, because I'm not trying to throw them under the bus, but then it goes to the parole board to review those names, to decide whether to put them out on the street. That's a fact.
And one thing.
Well, and I don't think that my question insinuated that you were voting to let people out, and I don't mean to insinuate that if you took it that way. But my concern is just that I'm hearing y'all say we got a plan for the future, but I think Calico Rock at best is a stopgap when we need to do something that's actually going to fix the problem for the future.
The only reason I don't think Calico Rock's just a complete stopgap is because of the type of facility it's been and type of people we've had. We've never had, through my whole tenure on the board, certain prisons all the time has had trouble staffing people. We've never had a problem at Calico Rock, never.
Okay.
It's always been, never been over 5%. So I don't look at Calico Rock necessarily as a stopgap as more as I do a viable facility. If you tried to turn, but that's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One thing I'd like to add regarding the EPA, that has not been exercised since January of 2023. So for 2.5 years, the EPA has not been used. And traditionally, before that, going back to 1986, it was used to alleviate overcrowding. And that was the only tool in the tool bag, if you will, for overcrowding.
Thank you. Senator King, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up, and I said off last time, Mr. Magnus, Chairman Magnus, we've talked about this, Mr. Watson, it's just like in simple construction, is why the site location is so important. If your site location, you got to go to Fort Smith and you got to go revamp these water systems, you're talking more time, more money. If your site prep is $250 million versus $50 million, that means less beds. Anybody in construction, common sense, can understand that. So that's why this site location is so important, that if you pick a site location that's going to, the site prep and the road structure, 96, there's grass growing up in the roads. It's not going to handle thousands of concrete trucks in construction. I mean, Mr. Magnus, we go back way. You remember Highway 65 when Missouri expanded it from Branson and did that? There was 4 or 5 construction companies went bankrupt because they did not do the site location and understanding the rock and everything. That's the big thing. So I'm just saying, whatever site location, we all agree we got to increase beds, increase them faster. But we also have to look down the road. If corrections does not receive a more percentage of the budget, and that's including if revenues keep going up and we don't go into budget shortfall or downtime, which I've experienced. These things, I was in D.C., these ideas that we're going to keep getting bailouts, that's happened in 10 and that, I talked to Senator Bozeman. He said, don't expect any more bailouts. So if we go back to the old days of shortfalls, not having enough money, it's even worse. But looking at our time, and you're going out, Mr. Magnus, is if like this last budget, corrections was only 8% of the budget. If it had been 10%, that your corrections would have got $130 million more. Well, you can do more with money. So in the long term of us, if I get another 4 years, I'll be gone. 5 years from now, 6 years now, we won't see 1,000 prisoners up there. We're going to be out of $1 billion. And we're not, look at Alabama and Utah. So if corrections would have, this is what is so important, these guys rubber stamp RSA at the end of the year, and it has got to have more operating money because we're in this situation because the legislatures haven't been budgeting enough money.
Well, that's not our call. Now, when you talk about Utah, I toured that facility. I understand why their cost was what it was. I kind of get what happened to them and why their cost was so high. But there again, how much money we receive is up to the governor and up to you all.
That's right.
And we the comments was made a while ago, and I meant to bring it up. When Senator Bryant brought up about the ACA, the Arkansas Department of Corrections is in the top 3 echelon of ACA. And we also do it cheaper in 24
Absolutely.
than any other state in the union.
No question.
And
You
that-
guys are
that-
one of the
that-
most
that-
efficient,
that-
economically operating prison systems in our country. No question.
And we don't get credit for that.
No,
sometimes.
you don't get credit for that, and I agree with you. But I'm just saying on the site prep, what is so critical about this, it's just common construction math. If you're allocating $750 million and your site prep, if we've seen these figures out with Fort Smith, the $240 million to revamp their system, maybe you drill down and get water. Okay, fine. But if the site prep is $250 million, that only leaves you $500 million to build beds. If you're taking $750 million and your site prep is $50 million, that leaves $700 million to build more beds. That is why it's so critical to pick the right location. I'm done.
It's critical to pick a location, but also some of the numbers you come up with is pulling them out of the thin air. No, I don't know what it's going to cost.
Okay, we're gonna wrap here in a minute. I've got Representative Kavanaugh, then Representative Beatty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Talking about expansion, is expansion an option at Grimes or McPherson?
No, ma'am,
And why is that?
because we can't staff them.
You can't get enough people
No,
to
ma'am.
staff.
I think we're at, I got the number here somewhere. I was looking at it a couple of days ago, and we just can't, at McPherson right now and Grimes, we're 2,369 inmates, and we're running right at 50%, or maybe it's down to 45% or something like that in staffing. And it's been that way prior to COVID, and we still can't, in fact, we're doing stuff at Newport we don't normally do. We're having, trying to get people hired there. We're doing our training right there. We're doing our academy at Grimes and stuff to try to get people,
And why is it that you can't staff there?
just not the people there, I guess, in that county. Independence, it draws from, I'm trying to think what county, I know it well, Newport's in, but Independence is next to it. Do I? Yeah, Jackson County. We just have trouble there, and we just can't staff them.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Rose, you recognize?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Watson, I just wanted to follow up on our conversation a minute ago.
Sure.
Kind of the sales pitch to solve the problem was the 500 bed expansion, North Central. And then I think when I was listening to you and Chairman Magnus, 200 to 300 bed community correction facilities.
Several of them.
Yes, it'd be 8 to 10 roughly just to get to that 3,000 bed number. If they're 200 to 300, it would take 8 to 10 to, plus the 500 to be 3,000.
That wasn't a recommendation to build that many ACC beds, and what we call ACC beds. They're really not ACC beds anymore. It's all part of ADC. But no, sir, we would not need that or want that many beds in an ACC facility.
And I think what I'd suggested was as many as 3 or 4, which would be, roughly 1,000 beds. If we could find locations where we have the need for all of those.
So I think what I was trying to get to, I think we already discussed, we've got a 1,700 bed backlog, or 1,700 prisoner backlog. And based on the projections we talked about last month, by 2031, we'll have roughly a 3,000 prisoner population growth here in Arkansas. So we're looking at 1,700 that we already don't have room for, plus another 3,000 in 5 years. And this is why I go back to, I love hearing options and alternatives, but 200 to 300 beds here or 500 beds here doesn't get us to 3,000. It doesn't get us to 4,700. And so I just come back to timeline and solutions. I'm happy to hear them, but I haven't heard them yet.
Well, and my point there is those are things that could be brought online faster. No, they're not the total solution, and we are going to need a large facility. As Benny mentioned, as I mentioned, if it could begin as if we could get the funding for a 1,000 bed facility, get that built, and then funding to expand it and move that as rapidly as possible. Because you're right, in 5 to 10 years, we're going to need the 3,000 beds. But just as importantly, we need some of these other types of beds too. And the community corrections, or anyway, they all fall under corrections. We move them over from the community correction side. But we need beds both for people that are sentenced directly from drug courts and also for parole violators who we know are going to come in for 90 days and then go back out. And especially for those types of prisoners, they are beds. Those types of facilities, keep them in their community where hopefully they can get out and reintegrate better.
Quick follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Get back in the queue. I may or may not take you. Representative Beatty, Chair, committee member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question's for Board Member Watson. I recall your letter. I read your letter. It had a lot of conjecture in there as far as what you would like to see and proposals that you drafted to send to the legislature. My question is, and I'm only going to ask this question because Chairman Magnus mentioned that would not be the recommendation. I've been here almost 5 years, a little over 5 years, and I don't think I've ever heard a recommendation or a request from corrections to add beds since I've been here. I know there have been discussions about that, but I've never heard anything directly from the department on the addition of beds. I haven't heard that there was a plan or anything else within your department to add the capacity. One thing I will say is I agree with Senator King. It's going to take more money on corrections, and I think every one of us in this room that voted for the PROTECT Act knew that at that point. And also at every session when we come in and we add additional offenses and additional time served, we're just exponentially increasing the problem. So my question, have you ever asked for additional beds and made a request to the legislature and been denied? And secondly, have you ever made a request to the legislature for anything that you needed at corrections and been denied?
Well, as the somewhat new guy on the board, even though I've been on the board for 5 years and working with Benny, he's told me that those requests have always been from him to the governor. So
From the board to the governor.
Right.
And then, because
Well,
if she's not
the
going to give
board
it
to him to the governor,
Yeah, if she's not going to put it in her balanced budget to, I say her because we have a her right now, because that's not fair, because she has tried to give us beds. That's
Correct.
obvious, okay? But in the past, we've requested more beds, and the sitting here and thinking, you've been here 5 years, you say, I've been here 26, and I know that we've requested beds and we have gotten beds. Right. We never have gotten a new one except for Governor Huckabee at Malvern. That's the only new one. But just before I got on the board, they finished Newport, which came through a governor. But the bottom line is we have added beds. We had a facility closed in Pine Bluff, and Governor Beebe gave us the money to remodel it and put it back online. So we gotten beds from other governors. We just have not gotten a big jump to solve the problem because we keep growing at 2%. If you grow 2,000 in 8 years of a governor's term, but he gives you 1,000, guess what? You're in the hole 1,000. And that's just the way it's been working, unfortunately.
And it's really just been an exponential problem since we removed that EPA from you where you couldn't release those prisoners out and free up bed space to take over some of the overcrowding that we're having in our counties, that right now our local law enforcement and our judges, we can't affect true the judicial side in our counties because there's not capacity. So we're all hurting at that level.
Yeah, Representative Beatty, we've had as many requests from law enforcement to do the EPAs as we have not to do it. We've had more, okay? But right now, if we did an EPA right now, we were looking at the numbers the other day with our consultant, we could release 600 inmates on the 90-day, not the 1 year, but on the 90-day. And that's the one that is kind of like troublesome because there may be a few classes of inmates like murder or something like that that doesn't get out, but that's the one, the 90 days almost covers everybody, like an armed robber, somebody that commits armed robbery. But the 1 year EPA, it has to be total nonviolent. But right now, if we did just a 90-day, my assumption the other day from talking to consultants, I think she told me 600 inmates if we could do it right now. It'd save 600 beds.
But keep in mind with those EPAs, those are inmates that are going to get out at the end of that 90-day period or 1 year period regardless. So probably doesn't make it smell any better. I mean, I don't think anybody likes the idea of that, but it's been the only tool in the toolkit since 1986. So, anyway.
Okay.
I'm not one to overly want to defend the EPA because, like Benny, it bothers me. But at the same time, when you realize this person's going to get out in 90 days anyway, and if the process takes longer, it might just be 30 days or 20 days. But again, that's a bed where you can bring prisoners in from the counties.
Also, the EPA got to be when you do it every 90 days, it just got to be releasing everybody 90 days. It just wasn't the emergency that it was designed to do, to release when you got to, I've been on the board when we got up to 3,200 people backed up in the county jail.
Last comment, Mr. Chair. Just kind of balance the power, and if you need funding, ask for funding. Where is funding approved?
Yes.
But we've heard no request. Okay. So I'm telling you, if that's an issue, balance of power, ask. Thank you.
Good point.
All right, I've got two left on here. We're not going to take any more after that. I've got Crawford and Rose. Are you still in? You got one more question? Get yours out of the way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wait a minute, I got the wrong one, but did I get you?
You got me.
Okay, good.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to give you each an opportunity to comment. We were talking about the backlog of beds and the prison population growth. It goes beyond the backlog, I'm sure you're aware, and we could pull out different numbers. I think the latest number I heard is 169,000 unserved or unpursued warrants in the state. If we don't do something, it's not just the prisoners we don't have somewhere to place that are already, it's the criminals that aren't even being arrested and aren't being locked up. We're implementing the PROTECT Act. We're trying to hold the violent worst offenders off our streets. I'd just like for your commentary on how do we handle that, and how do we protect our Kansans?
Do what Governor Sanders requested, and let's build a prison.
Hey, can y'all get just a little closer? The people watching online can't hear you.
What Governor Sanders is recommending to build a prison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're not going to get any argument out of me on that point.
Representative Crawford, you recognize.
Thank you. I'm up here.
Gotcha.
How many nonviolent do we have in our prisons right now? Do you know?
Well, I gave a number the other day at Rogers, and I need to revisit that to make sure I give you all the right number. I gave at Rogers. It was probably about 48, and I don't even remember which side it fell on, pretty close to 50-50. But I also know that some of our staff was trying to research that again and found out that might not be correct. If you want me to, I'll get you that number and get it to the chair.
Okay. And thank you for that. One more question. What is your thought about possibly splitting the population and looking at a mental health facility? I know you've heard that argument. What do you think?
I think almost everywhere in the United States, the prison system has also become a mental institutions. And we get it all the time. Now, I will tell you that in my opinion, which I'm sure not a doctor, I'm farthest from that, sometimes on the free world, they medicate them too much. We find that quite often when we bring them into prison. They might be under 4 different medications, and then we pare it down to 1 or 2, and they operate fine. But that's just my opinion, because so what happens is when that person comes off that medication, has mental health medications, more than likely something's going to happen. And it's not usually good. And they end up with us.
All right.
And some of our facilities, for instance.
Can you get closer?
Oh, for instance, Malvern, basically, when you talk about inmates and you talk about beds, we have inmates that would look like a wing at a nursing home because they're elderly, they may have dementia, they have all sorts of health problems. We have medical wings. You know, we hope to have grand opening here soon on our new facility here in Little Rock that's for women, mainly there's basically 2 wings. They're for inmates that are pregnant or have just given birth, and then the other wing is for women with serious health problems that basically need nursing home type care. So,
And that's another example. It's only a 150 bed facility, but that's another example of us adding beds everywhere we have a chance. When we do that, it does raise our cost. So when I said we're the cheapest in the nation, I said in 2024. I don't know what it'll be in 2025. But when we do that, it does raise our cost because those smaller facilities do cost more to operate.
Okay, one more and I'm through. How much are you guys utilizing the reentry facilities that are privately owned across the state that are not full?
We try to use all we can. I heard that testimony the other day, and the gentleman was here. I don't see him now. It was here from Hidden Creek, and he'll tell you right now we've got more inmates in his beds. But we have a couple of roadblocks with those programs. We run out of money. And there again, Representative Beatty made it clear. We asked for more money. But we're going to have more money if we're going to keep those beds filled, number one. And number two, people got to understand about reentry. It's not that they just can pick an inmate up. That inmate can be chosen, then it has to be approved by the parole board to be able to go to reentry. It just is. There's a process because at reentry they're getting out. You know, we're talking about EPA. Well, that inmate that goes to reentry getting out of prison early, 16 months early, 18 months early. Yeah, he has to go to reentry part of that time, but he's also getting out early. So.
But if our prisons are overloaded, if 50% or less are nonviolent, I think we need to rethink what we're doing in our prison population.
Ma'am, I've been saying that for about 5 to 10 years.
Well, then we agree. Okay.
I'm not sure. That's the reason Mr. Watson now is even bringing up our treatment centers type stuff.
Right.
They're important. They do a good job.
Thank you.
Okay, that was the last question. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. We appreciate the difficult job you do. Mr. Watson, I complimented you publicly in the media, and I will again thank you for thinking maybe outside the box. I'm not through with you yet. Outside the box, and I appreciate your comment that you'd like to have a little bit longer time to look at something before you send it on down the road. Yeah. And I say that here a lot. We rush too much stuff through.
Especially when tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars are involved.
You've had a difficult job, and you've done it a number of years, and we thank you because we don't think about the stuff you have to every day. And I know this is a lot of passion on the issues where this is at, but it's a difficult situation that a lot of people are in. So thank y'all for being here.
Well, thank you, Chair.
For the citizens group, Ms. Cardenas, or if Mr. Watson, I didn't see if he's still here. Do y'all want to come back and make a brief statement? If not, that's fine. But I see Adam back there. If you want to. And again, I appreciate all of it that testified today, staying for the entire meeting. We appreciate your input. Mr. Adam Watson and Natalie Cardenas, you are recognized to wrap up.
So I took a couple quick notes, which I'll just run through a couple things that we can address from the other witnesses' comments. So to Ms. Laidlaw's comments about, she realized that the roads were better from a different entry. Those emails that she sent were on July 8th and July 10th. She had an in-person meeting with Joe Porfiry on July 12th. And after that meeting, there was no more dissent from TSS about this project. And as you saw, it was under contract a few weeks later. So our question would remain, if there was communication to her that indicated that there was better access from a different way, why weren't those emails produced in our FOIA request? Because we've not seen that. I think we got off track from our specific complaint today, which is understandable because there's a lot of topics going around that are worthy of discussion about this prison, about the prison system overall, etc. But we were under the impression that we would get to the heart of more of the issues in our complaint. And I don't want to be too hard on the committee for this, for sure, but I didn't see a lot of evidence presented to dispute any of our claims. As to the hardening and the design contract, I think a slide that we showed was referenced about the decrease in price. That was not just due to ACA minimums. That was a design change from a 3-wing facility with 1 wing to house maximum security, 1 for medium security, and 1 for minimum security. The current design contract proposed is for 2,500 dormitory-style beds and 500 double bunks. So I don't know how that aligns with the state needs, but I want everybody to be aware that that's the type of facility that we're looking at when it comes to hardening. Outside of that, and probably to my earlier comment about the intent of us being here, being to get answers, I'm disappointed that a number of our upper chamber of the legislature were unwilling to even issue a subpoena to ask a governor's office representative to be here to answer questions. To the comments about who runs the DOC and who's in charge, I think those are questions that Mr. Porfiry needs to answer. But what's clear is that when committees of our legislature call for a representative of the DOC, Mr. Porfiry shows up to testify. Outside of that, I think we've covered everything on my notes.
We think you'd be here, and I will comment on one reason I gave latitude. As you said, we got off on some other things. It's all interconnected. Information is what this was about today. What most of the audience is concerned about is their immediate need. The more information the legislature has, the more we can understand the issue. Y'all have brought that before. We get that out of news articles, social media, and all that. So I hope there's more interest in that. We'll see where this goes. There's been a lot of information.
I think you're absolutely right. And look, that's why we opened with, we don't want this conversation to end today. I think there is much more that should be discussed and brought up about this issue, both with regard to the Franklin County site and whatever we're going to do with that, if anything, but also with regard to the prison system as a whole. So I hope this isn't a closed matter.
We thank you for being here today, and for all in the audience that made the trip and took your day off and all. We greatly appreciate that. Thank you, members that have stayed. Other ones I realize had to go, but this is all live streamed. You can go back and replay it too if you want to. Anything else, Mr. Co-Chair?
I'd just like to thank everyone that was here today that made statements. I think it brought a lot of light to what we discussed and did not know about during the session, because some of us knew nothing about what was happening and had no idea. And I think it brought a lot of light to what we were thinking was possibility or what it couldn't be possibility. Still don't know a whole lot, but we'll find out more. I'm sure, in the future. But thank you guys for coming, and everyone that testified and everyone that asked questions and showed up today. Thank you.
With that, we are adjourned.